Hello there, and welcome to Secretum Histories, where curiosity takes the long, quiet road and mystery becomes a lullaby. Tonight, our journey drifts to the coldest, whitest place on Earth, a continent so silent that even the wind seems to whisper instead of roar. Antarctica, the bottom of the world wrapped in miles of ice, shrouded in fog and haunted by questions as old as human imagination itself. Somewhere beneath its frozen stillness, people say, there lies a black pyramid, a dark geometric shape rising from the endless white, an enigma standing alone among the glaciers. It has been called many things: a ruin, a fortress, a relic of a forgotten civilization. Whether it's stone, shadow, or simple illusion, its presence has captured something deep within us. The part of the human mind that still believes there might be secrets hiding just beyond the edge of what we can see. But before we slip further into this frozen riddle, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Is it warm where you are? Or are you wrapped in blankets, letting the sound of the evening slow you down? The world spins through seasons, ice and sun trading places, but right now, in this moment, you're here. And if you find this gentle exploration soothing, a little pause before sleep, I'd be grateful if you left a like or subscribe to this quiet corner of curiosity. It helps this space of calm wander a little further into the world. Now take a deep breath and let your thoughts drift like snowflakes settling on untouched ground. The story begins at the bottom of the Earth, in a land almost no one sees. Antarctica isn't a single landscape. It's an entire world of ice and silence. Stretching over 5 million square miles, it's larger than Europe, but almost entirely hidden beneath glaciers that reach more than 2 miles thick. In the heart of that white wilderness, there are places so remote that even satellites have trouble peering through the storms that dance across their surface. It's here, among the shadows and ridges of the Ellsworth Mountains, that something unusual began to appear in photographs. An immense triangular form, rising from the snow like the corner of some buried monument. The shape was too clean, too perfect, too deliberate. It wasn't like the broken chaos of natural rock. It had the look of symmetry, of architecture. People saw the images and paused. A pyramid in Antarctica. The idea was impossible, and yet the pictures were right there. When the photographs first began to spread online, they carried no clear source, no definitive coordinates. Some claimed they were taken by explorers, others said they came from government archives. A few traced them to Google Earth itself, a shadow caught by a satellite passing overhead. Whatever the origin, the image burned into public imagination. A black pyramid rising out of white emptiness. It was a symbol made for mystery. Scientists were quick to offer explanations. They said it was a nunatak, a mountain peak that jutted through the surrounding ice. Antarctica has many of them. Rocky spires carved by glaciers, weathered into strange and angular shapes. But even with that reasoning, something about this one felt different. It wasn't just the shape. It was the setting, the sense of isolation. It looked less like a mountain and more like something built long ago and then forgotten, sealed beneath snow for an eternity. The human brain is wired for patterns. When we see a triangle where no triangle should be, our minds leap to meaning. We remember the pyramids of Egypt, the temples of the Maya, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Geometry whispers of intelligence. Straight lines hint at design. The world might be filled with randomness, but the moment we spot order in the wild, we imagine intention. That impulse, ancient and instinctive, is what gave birth to the legend of the Black Pyramid of Antarctica. The idea isn't new. For centuries, explorers and dreamers have looked at Antarctica and wondered what might be hidden beneath its ice. Before the 20th century, the continent was barely seen by human eyes. For most of history, it was a blank space on maps, a theoretical landmass drawn to balance the globe. Old cartographers called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. In those empty spaces, anything was possible. Lost cities, strange beasts, ancient civilizations, all could live unseen in the whiteness. When the first explorers reached the continent in the early 1900s, they described a silence so deep it felt alive. Temperatures dropped below anything the human body was meant to endure. Winds could strip metal bare. Ice creaked like wood under pressure, shifting in slow motion, cracking across miles. It was a landscape both alien and earthly, a place that didn't care if anyone ever understood it. Even now it holds more secrets than answers. Underneath the glaciers, there are mountain ranges the size of the Alps, buried lakes that haven't seen sunlight in millions of years, and air pockets so old they preserve the atmosphere of forgotten ages. Satellites have mapped ridges and valleys that stretch for hundreds of miles beneath the ice sheet, evidence that before the continent froze, it might have looked very different. Fossilized pollen, ancient marine creatures, and traces of flowing rivers have all been found in the few rocky outcrops that break through the surface. That's the first quiet truth that makes the pyramid story so haunting. Antarctica wasn't always frozen, it was once green. Around 100 million years ago, it was part of a massive supercontinent known as Gondwana, covered in forests and rivers, inhabited by dinosaurs and early mammals. Then, as tectonic plates drifted and climates shifted, the land sank toward the pole. Over millions of years, ice began to spread, growing thicker, harder, heavier, until the world beneath it disappeared completely. But what if, before that final freezing, someone, or something, was there? That's the question that turned a geological curiosity into a legend. People began to imagine a civilization lost to time, one that built monuments before the ice swallowed the world. Some called it the last remnant of Atlantis. Others linked it to the Anunnaki, to ancient engineers who left their marks across the globe. A few believed it was human, a forgotten branch of our own story erased by an age of ice. The Black Pyramid became their symbol, a single clue surviving at the end of the earth. From there, the theories branched like cracks in frozen glass. Some said the structure was built thousands of years before recorded history, when Antarctica was still warm. Others thought it was far older, perhaps a relic of beings who visited Earth before humans learned to shape stone. The more scientists dismissed the claims, the more the story grew, because the human heart loves contradiction. It loves the whisper of what if. The idea of an ancient civilization under the ice doesn't come from nowhere. In 1513, a Turkish admiral named Piri Reis drew a world map that showed the coast of Antarctica, centuries before its discovery. The land was drawn without ice, complete with rivers and mountain ranges. How could that be? Scholars said it was coincidence, or a copying of older maps from times when the continent's outline was guessed from imagination. But for those who believed in hidden histories, it was proof that someone, long ago, had seen Antarctica before it froze. Then came whispers of secret expeditions, of hidden research stations, of governments finding things they wouldn't explain. The more the world modernized, the more the mystery deepened. Photos surfaced online showing triangular peaks, metallic glints, structures that looked too regular to be natural. Each image carried that same chill of curiosity, the sense that maybe, under miles of ice, something waits. Of course, most scientists view the Black Pyramid as an illusion, a trick of geology and perspective. In the Ellsworth Mountains, glacial erosion can carve rock into shapes that mimic architecture. Ice and light conspire to exaggerate angles, to create contrast where none exists. From above, a ridge can seem symmetrical, its shadows perfectly triangular. The mind fills in the rest. Yet even that explanation doesn't make the story less compelling. It only adds to its beauty. Because the mystery isn't really about the stone or the snow. It's about what happens when we look at something so ancient, so silent, that it refuses to answer back. The Black Pyramid isn't just a shape in the ice, it's a reflection of ourselves, Our need to know, to imagine, to feel connected to something beyond the small circle of time we live in. Antarctica has always been a mirror for mystery. It's the last untouched continent, a place where the human story still feels small. When explorers stand on its frozen plateaus, they see horizons without end, skies that bend into infinity. There's no sound but wind, no life but what hides in the edges of snow. And under that silence lies a record of Earth's past, layer after layer of ancient air trapped in ice, each one a frozen whisper of the planet's memory. Scientists drill deep into those layers, reading them like pages of a book. Every ring of ice tells of storms, of volcanic winters, of eras when the world was warmer. Sometimes, when they melt the cores and listen to the bubbles hiss, they say it feels like hearing the planet breathe. That's what makes Antarctica so special. It's both timeless and fragile, both unknowable and precise. And it's within that paradox that the Black Pyramid lives, balance between science and story, fact and fascination. The more we learn about the continent, the more we realise how little we truly understand it. Beneath the ice sheet, satellite radar has revealed entire landscapes hidden for millions of years. Valleys, lakes, even possible rivers that still flow in the darkness. Lake Vostok, sealed under more than 2 miles of ice, contains fresh water untouched by sunlight for at least 15 million years. When scientists finally drilled through to sample it, they found microbial life, tiny survivors in total isolation. If life can persist there, cut off from everything we know, who can say what else might endure in those hidden worlds? So the story of the Black Pyramid continues. It grows not because of proof, but because of possibility. In a world mapped and measured, we crave the idea that some mysteries remain untouched. The pyramid stands, whether a stone, shadow or symbol, as a reminder that beneath the white silence of the Earth's edge, something unknown may still be waiting. And as we move deeper into this frozen story, we'll wander through the vast, forgotten history of the continent itself, a place that has seen forests turn to glaciers, oceans freeze into stone, and perhaps, once, the footsteps of a civilization long buried under the endless ice. Antarctica looks, at first glance, like the end of the world, but in truth, it is more like its beginning. Long before the first explorers came to plant flags in its ice, or the first satellite passed overhead to take its silent photographs, this continent lived a life that few can imagine. Beneath the endless white lies a story written in stone, in sediment, in the quiet pulse of ancient climates. It is a world that remembers a time when there was no ice at all. When the Earth was young, Antarctica sat not at the bottom of the globe but in the heart of it. It was part of a vast landmass called Gondwana, joined to Africa, India, Australia and South America. Back then the air was warm and heavy with moisture. Rivers wound through dense forests. Giant ferns and towering conifers covered the land, and the ground itself hummed with insects. Fossilized leaves found deep in the mountains tell of broad valleys filled with vegetation. The plants that once grew there drank sunlight that now barely touches the surface. The rocks themselves remember that warmth. In certain outcrops, scientists have found seams of coal, the compressed ghosts of trees that once fell and rotted in the humidity of prehistoric swamps. Coal is not born in ice. It is the memory of sunlight stored in stone, and it whispers that the frozen continent was once green. It was a place that saw seasons, that knew rain and rivers, that may have felt the tread of creatures now long vanished. Over time, the continents began to drift. The great plates beneath the oceans shifted like slow rafts of stone, rearranging the map of the planet inch by inch. What is now Antarctica began to move south, sliding toward the pole over millions of years. As it drifted, the air cooled. Forests thinned, glaciers crept across the valleys, and the warmth that had once filled the skies began to fade. The world entered an age of frost. It is difficult to imagine the weight of that transformation. A continent the size of the United States and Mexico combined was buried under a sheet of ice more than 2 miles thick. Mountains disappeared. Rivers stopped flowing. The land itself sank under the burden, pressed down by billions of tons of frozen water. And yet, even now, under that crushing stillness, the continent moves. The ice flows slowly, almost imperceptibly, grinding the rock beneath it, sculpting the land in silence. Beneath the surface there is another world. Dark, secret, still alive. Radar imaging has revealed hidden mountain ranges running across the interior. These peaks, called the Gambutsev Mountains, are as tall as the Alps but completely buried beneath the ice. No one has ever seen them directly. Their existence was discovered only through the faint echoes of radio waves bouncing off the hidden stone. It is as though a second continent sleeps beneath the first, unseen but still there. Frozen in place for millions of years, scientists have also found vast subglacial lakes sealed beneath the ice, some larger than entire countries. Lake Vostok, one of the most studied, lies under nearly 4 kilometers of ice, and may have been cut off from the surface for 15 million years. In its depths, there is water that has never touched the modern atmosphere. It is pressurized, dark and cold beyond comprehension, yet somehow it holds life. Microbes that endure in the absence of sunlight, feeding on minerals that seep from the rock below. Every discovery like this reshapes what we think we know about where life can survive. If life can persist in a place so isolated, some wonder whether it could have existed there before the ice came. Long ago, when Antarctica was still part of a temperate world, there were lakes, rivers and coastlines. The fossils of freshwater plants and extinct amphibians prove it. There were probably insects, perhaps even reptiles, and maybe early mammals taking shelter under the canopy of ancient trees. When the first glaciers advanced, that entire world vanished. The ice sealed it away, layer by layer, like a time capsule too large for any museum. To reach back into that deep history, scientists drill into the ice itself. Each layer they extract is a page in the planet's diary. The deeper they go, the older the record becomes. Air trapped in tiny bubbles reveals what the atmosphere once was, how much carbon it held, how warm the Earth used to be. Some cores reach back nearly 1 million years, chronicling cycles of ice and thaw, of shifting climates and wandering species. In that frozen archive, the past breathes. But even that record has limits. Beyond a certain depth, the ice turns to bedrock, and what lies beneath becomes harder to read. There are layers of sediment and fossil beds still untouched, buried so far below that no drill has ever reached them. Somewhere under all that weight could be evidence of ancient forests or long-vanished coastlines, or something entirely unknown. That uncertainty is part of what keeps Antarctica endlessly fascinating. It is the ultimate vault of geological memory. To understand what the continent once was, researchers also study its edges. Along the transantarctic mountains and the Antarctic peninsula, rocky outcrops break through the ice like small islands of time. In those fragments, they find the remnants of ferns, wood, and even pollen. Each discovery adds another brushstroke to a picture that defies what most people imagine. Antarctica was once a living land. It had weather, seasons, and life abundant. And because it was once alive, the thought that something built could lie beneath the ice becomes less impossible. The Black Pyramid story feeds on that sliver of plausibility. If the land was once warm enough for trees and rivers, might it not have been warm enough for civilization? It's an idea that drifts quietly between geology and legend, suspended somewhere in the space between science and curiosity. Even without myths, the transformation of the continent is almost unbelievable. The forces that buried Antarctica were not sudden. They unfolded over tens of millions of years. Every flake of snow that fell added its weight, pressing down the layer beneath it until the ice became a moving sea of solid water. Over time, the weight of that sea changed the very shape of the Earth's crust, depressing the land it covered. The coastlines of other continents rose and fell in response, like slow tides of stone. In a sense, the world is still adjusting to the presence of Antarctica's ice. What is perhaps most humbling is that the ice is not eternal. It grows and retreats in cycles, breathing with the planet's temperature. There were times when it melted almost completely, flooding the oceans and reshaping the map. If it melted again today, sea levels would rise by more than 50 meters, drowning cities and coasts around the world. So, while we think of Antarctica as immovable, it is in truth the most dynamic part of Earth's surface, a frozen engine of change. That constant motion creates its own mysteries. The ice flows outward from the centre of the continent toward the sea, creaking, splitting, carving massive icebergs into the Southern Ocean. Beneath the glaciers, water pools and flows in channels lubricating the movement. The continent is alive in slow motion, a colossal heartbeat that we can measure only through machines. And somewhere within that endless motion, under those miles of shifting frost, there are shapes that refuse to be ignored. Geometric shadows, dark outlines, lines that seem too straight to be natural. For all the data and measurements, much of Antarctica remains unvisited. Less than 1% of its land is free of ice, and the interior is nearly inaccessible. The temperature can drop below -80 degrees Celsius. Winds can howl faster than a hurricane. Storms can last for weeks, and darkness swallows the continent for half the year. It is a place that protects its secrets well. Satellites scan its surface, but beneath that thick, bright armour, the details blur. Every radar return, every flicker of shadow becomes a potential clue. When explorers or scientists fly over the continent, they describe a sense of scale that is almost incomprehensible. Mountains appear as faint ridges of grey, rising and disappearing in the white. Valleys stretch beyond sight, their shapes muted by snow. It feels like looking at the bones of the planet itself. There is no sound, no scent, nothing to mark time except the rhythm of one's own breath. And in that emptiness, the mind begins to imagine. It fills the silence with questions, and the Black Pyramid becomes one of those questions given shape. For geologists, that shape is simply a mountain. For dreamers, it's something more. And between the two lies the space where fascination grows. Even the most rational scientists admit that Antarctica holds things they don't yet understand. The magnetic field fluctuates in strange ways over certain regions. Seismic readings suggest caverns and hollow pockets under the ice. Some of those anomalies might be caused by geology, some by frozen water, and some by features we have yet to identify. The continent resists certainty. This resistance to clear answers is part of its allure. Every expedition uncovers something unexpected. Microbes that defy freezing, meteorites preserved in pristine condition, evidence of ancient volcanoes sleeping under the ice. Each new piece of information seems to hint at another layer beneath it. The deeper we look, the more complex the picture becomes. In that way, Antarctica is less like a puzzle to be solved, and more like a story that unfolds slowly, page by page, in a language we are still learning to read. It's also a place of extremes, not only in temperature but in time. Standing there is like stepping outside of history. There are no cities, no ruins, no signs of the human past, just the wind moving over endless ice. That absence makes the idea of the Black Pyramid so striking. It introduces the possibility of memory where there should be none, a fragment of intention in a landscape defined by indifference. Those who study the geology of the continent often say that it holds the key to understanding the Earth's climate, both past and future. Ice cores record carbon dioxide levels, volcanic eruptions, even distant dust storms carried by the wind from other continents. Each bubble of trapped air is a piece of evidence. Together, they show that the planet's climate has never been stable. It swings between warm and cold, between sea and glacier, always in motion. To imagine that such a place might once have supported people or cities isn't so much disbelief as it is a yearning to belong to that vast rhythm, to find ourselves somewhere in that deep timeline. When early explorers mapped the Antarctic coastline, They named its mountains after kings, poets, and mythic places. Even then, they sensed that this land needed more than coordinates. It needed stories. The Black Pyramid fits into that tradition. It is the latest chapter in humanity's long habit of giving mystery a face. We may never find a carved stone beneath the ice, but the thought of it keeps us looking, keeps us wondering, keeps us awake just long enough to dream. And so the frozen continent endures, older than memory, patient in its silence. Beneath its white armour lies the record of worlds long gone. Forests turned to dust, rivers frozen mid-flow, mountains that no one has ever seen. Every so often the ice shifts and reveals a glimpse, a rock face, a dark shadow, a geometric peak, and in that glimpse something ancient stirs in us, a sense that we are standing at the edge of a forgotten story waiting to be remembered. As the snow drifts across the mountains and the sky darkens into the long polar night, the mind turns again to that solitary shape half buried in the ice. Whether mountain or monument, it stands as a marker in the great silence, pointing the way to what comes next, the moment when the first photographs begin to spread and whispers of discovery echo through the digital age, reviving the oldest human question of all. What truly lies beneath the surface? It began, as many modern mysteries do, with an image, a single photograph, passed quietly between corners of the internet, shared first on obscure forums and then across social media. At first glance it was simple enough, a landscape of white and shadow, an aerial view of the Antarctic range, the kind of picture that might appear in a geography textbook or a science magazine. But there, among the ridges and folds of snow, something caught the eye. A dark, angular shape, too sharp, too symmetrical, too deliberate to be just another mountain. The contrast between the black triangle and the vast whiteness surrounding it was unmistakable. It looked, unmistakably, like a pyramid. No one could say exactly where the photograph had come from. Some claimed it was taken by a member of a research expedition. Others insisted it was a leaked satellite image. A few traced it back to Google Earth, where coordinates were said to reveal a mysterious triangular formation rising from the ice near the Ellsworth Mountains. The story was fluid, shifting with each retelling, the details bending like light through fog. But what remained constant was the image itself, the Black Pyramid standing stark against the snow. The first whispers appeared in the mid-2000s, when the internet had become the new frontier of speculation. Conspiracy sites and digital communities began discussing the structure, comparing maps, overlaying images, and debating its dimensions. The excitement spread quickly, fueled by curiosity and the familiar thrill of the forbidden. It was the age when satellite imagery was suddenly in everyone's hands. For the first time in history, ordinary people could explore the planet from above. They could zoom into deserts, forests, mountain peaks, and now the last blank space on Earth. And in that blankness, they thought they saw proof that the world still held secrets. The image became a kind of digital campfire, drawing people in from across the world. Some saw in it a simple geological feature, an illusion created by shadow and angle. Others saw a revelation. They spoke of ancient builders, of civilizations erased by ice, of forgotten epochs that predated all recorded history. In the quiet of their rooms, under the hum of computer screens, the white silence of Antarctica became the backdrop for 1,000 new stories. Scientists were cautious in their responses. They pointed out that the Ellsworth Mountains are full of peaks shaped by wind erosion and glacial movement. Over time, the ice scrapes the stone in long, straight lines, carving faces and ridges that can easily form triangles when viewed from above. The light, depending on the time of day, can exaggerate those angles. What looks like a clean edge from one perspective becomes an uneven ridge from another. To the trained eye, the pyramid was simply a mountain. Sharp, yes, but natural. But explanations, even when reasonable, rarely extinguish fascination. They often do the opposite. Every dismissal seemed to strengthen belief. The skeptics became part of the story, their caution feeding the narrative of secrecy. If scientists were so eager to dismiss it, believers reasoned, perhaps there really was something to hide. The legend grew, weaving together fragments of archaeology, myth, and imagination into something that felt almost alive. Soon, new evidence began to surface. Grainy videos appeared on YouTube showing what were said to be zoomed-in views of the pyramid from aircraft windows. Anonymous voices whispered about government research bases built near the site. A few even claimed that certain coordinates on Google Earth had been blurred or restricted. Proof, they said, that authorities were concealing something extraordinary. The digital age had become the perfect incubator for the oldest human instinct, the desire to uncover what lies hidden. Each version of the story carried its own flavour of mystery. Some said the pyramid was one of several scattered across the continent, part of an ancient grid aligning with the stars. Others connected it to lost civilizations like Atlantis or Lemuria, those mythical continents said to have vanished beneath ocean or ice. There were theories linking it to extraterrestrial visitors, claiming that the symmetry of its sides reflected mathematical precision beyond early human capability. The story expanded outward, absorbing elements from every corner of speculative history. Still, at the core of it all was the same image, a black triangle on a white field, silent, frozen, defiant. That image had the power of simplicity. It asked questions without words, questions that no expert could fully silence. Why did it look so perfect? Why there, in a place so remote, so untouched? Even when alternative explanations were offered, people kept returning to the picture, zooming in and out as though the truth might reveal itself in a few more pixels. In a way, the fascination made sense. Antarctica is the most inaccessible place on Earth, and inaccessibility breeds imagination. Few people have ever set foot near the Ellsworth Mountains. Even fewer have seen them from the air. For most of humanity, the continent exists only in photographs and stories. It's a vast white absence on the map, a void that invites projection. The mind, faced with emptiness, fills it with meaning. The pyramid became that meaning, a symbol of all that the ice might conceal. As the images spread, a curious blend of science and storytelling began to take shape. Amateur researchers compared the supposed pyramid's coordinates with known geological formations. Some noted its alignment with nearby mountain ranges and argued that such precision was unlikely to be coincidental. Others overlaid star charts, suggesting that the pyramid pointed toward Orion's belt, echoing the layout of the Great Pyramids of Giza. These comparisons, often drawn by enthusiasts rather than experts, nevertheless captivated audiences. The story began to transcend geography. It became less about one structure and more about the possibility of continuity, a link between ancient builders across continents and ages. Meanwhile, professional scientists continued their work largely indifferent to the chatter. The ice cores drilled in Antarctica were revealing patterns of climate change, not hidden monuments. Glaciologists studied the slow movement of ice sheets, seismologists measured the continent's trembling heart, and biologists examined microbes thriving in places untouched for eons. Yet, even among the research community, there were quiet acknowledgements of how little was truly known about what lay beneath. The ice, after all, hides entire mountain ranges. If nature can conceal something that vast, what else might remain unseen? The line between curiosity and belief is thin. The pyramid story walked it perfectly. It wasn't simply a claim, it was an invitation to wonder. For every skeptic who explained the formation as a Nunatak, there was someone willing to imagine it as a relic of another age. The legend gained strength precisely because it existed at the intersection of two truths, that Antarctica was once warm and habitable, and that its buried world remains largely unexplored. When facts leave room for imagination, stories take root. The rise of social media gave the tale new life. Short clips, dramatic music, and voiceovers filled with quiet conviction began appearing everywhere. Viewers heard phrases like "NASA images reveal" or "scientists baffled by discovery." The sources were rarely verified, but verification was never really the point. What mattered was the sense of discovery, the thrill of standing at the edge of something forbidden. And in a world where information moves faster than understanding, that thrill spreads easily. In those same years, Antarctica was experiencing one of the most intense periods of scientific exploration in its history. Nations established new research stations. Ice-penetrating radar and gravitational mapping projects revealed vast topographical features beneath the ice sheet. Some of these discoveries genuinely surprised scientists. Mountain chains as large as the Alps, subglacial lakes interconnected by mysterious channels, even signs of volcanic activity buried under miles of ice. Each announcement, though grounded in data, seemed to echo faintly with the resonance of legend. The Black Pyramid slipped easily into that context. When people looked at those satellite renderings, they saw more than geology. They saw evidence of how fragile our understanding of the planet still is. It wasn't that they truly believed there was a stone pyramid under the ice. It was that they wanted to believe the Earth could still astonish us. In a way, the photograph wasn't a discovery, but a mirror, reflecting our hunger for mystery. Some of the earliest claims traced the pyramid's coordinates to an area near the Sentinel Range, where three sharp peaks rise close together. When seen from a particular angle, one of these peaks forms a nearly perfect triangle. The lighting at certain times of year creates the illusion of a smooth surface, making the mountain appear black and uniform. Climbers who reached the area in later expeditions described nothing artificial, just steep, wind-carved stone. But by then, the legend had grown too large to be undone by testimony. Photographs could be debated, eyewitnesses could be doubted. The story had already taken on a life of its own, and perhaps that's what gives it staying power. The pyramid is not just a shape in the ice. It is an idea that belongs to the imagination as much as to the landscape. It sits at the meeting point of technology and myth, born from the same tools that allow us to see every corner of the world and yet still feel that some corners remain hidden. The image exists because of satellites, but the meaning we assign to it belongs to something older, our instinct to find significance in patterns and shapes. Even now, years after the first photos circulated, the pyramid continues to resurface. Every few months a new video or article revives it, dressed in new words but carrying the same quiet fascination. The image is always slightly different, sometimes sharper, sometimes blurred, but the triangle remains eternal and patient in the snow. There are those who insist it must be real, and those who insist it cannot be. Between them lies the real story, the simple truth that wonder persists, even in the age of explanation. For scientists, the Black Pyramid is a reminder of how easily perception can deceive. For storytellers, it's proof that mystery never dies. It just changes its medium. What explorers once whispered about around campfires, we now share through screens. The landscape of the unknown has shifted from maps to pixels, but the feeling is the same. It's the same pulse that once drove ships into uncharted waters, the same curiosity that built telescopes to peer beyond the stars. In every age, we need a horizon we can't quite reach. In that sense, the pyramid isn't just about Antarctica. It's about the human tendency to find meaning in emptiness, to see stories where there is silence. The white wilderness of the South Pole, untouched and indifferent, becomes the perfect stage for this longing. Each image, each rumour, each argument becomes another layer of ice, covering and revealing, concealing and reflecting. The myth grows not because it is proven, but because it is beautiful. If you zoom out on the satellite map, the continent stretches endlessly. Mountains rise like frozen waves, and the pyramid becomes just one shape among thousands. Yet it continues to draw the eye. Even knowing it's probably just rock and shadow doesn't diminish its power. There's something soothing about believing that somewhere beneath all that ice, Something remains untouched, waiting to be found. And perhaps that's the deeper reason the story endures. In an age where we can measure everything, we still crave what cannot be measured. We still want to imagine lost civilizations, hidden relics, forgotten histories that survive the march of time. Antarctica, with its impenetrable silence, gives that longing a home. The Black Pyramid is less a monument in the ice than a monument in our imagination, a shape that asks us to remember how it feels to not know. As scientists continue to map the continent and the ice continues its slow drift toward the sea, the image still lingers in countless minds. It flickers in late-night searches, in quiet videos watched before sleep, in documentaries that blend data with dream. Each time it appears, the question returns, softer now, less about proof and more about wonder. What if it were true? What if beneath those frozen miles the Earth holds not just history but memory? The first photograph was never about evidence. It was about the human impulse to connect dots, to see meaning in shadow. In that way, the Black Pyramid is eternal. Long after the ice has melted and the continent has changed again, the idea will persist, reborn in new stories, new images, new interpretations. It stands as a symbol of our endless curiosity, that quiet restlessness that refuses to let the world become ordinary. And so the whispers continue, carried not by wind but by connection, by the invisible threads that link one curious mind to another. Each viewer adds their own layer of imagination, reshaping the story until it belongs to everyone who's ever stared at a photograph and felt the tug of mystery. Whether it's a mountain or a monument, the Black Pyramid of Antarctica has already done its work. It has reminded us that the unknown still exists, that the world still hides secrets worth dreaming about. Far above the continent, satellites glide through orbit, taking new images every day. The ice shifts, the light changes, and the shadows evolve. Somewhere among those endless ridges, the dark triangle still waits to be rediscovered by the next pair of curious eyes. And when it is, the whispers will begin again, softly, inevitably, just as they always do when humanity finds another question half buried in the snow. For as long as humans have looked at the world, we've been drawn to shapes that repeat with purpose. Circles, squares, triangles, patterns that seem to whisper of intention. Nature is wild and restless, but geometry feels deliberate, calm, composed. That's why the Black Pyramid of Antarctica unsettles people. It looks too orderly, too planned, standing in a landscape ruled by chaos. A perfect triangle in the middle of nowhere, where the wind sculpts everything into irregularity. It shouldn't exist, and yet it does, at least in photographs, in the grainy edge where snow meets shadow. The human eye is wired to recognize symmetry. We see faces in clouds, figures in trees, and meaning in mountains. It's a survival instinct that never quite turned off, the ability to see order where none might exist. Yet there's something different about triangles, something ancient. The triangle, perhaps more than any other shape, feels charged with significance. It appears in temples, in pyramids, in sacred symbols carved into stone long before language was written down. It's the shape of strength, stability, and balance, a geometry that resists time. So when a triangular mountain appears in the least human place on Earth, our imagination wakes up. The photographs show three visible faces forming a near-perfect pyramid, with crisp ridges rising to a single peak. The edges seem straight, the angles consistent, the proportions uncannily human. To the untrained eye, it looks engineered. The ice around it flows like fabric draped over stone, revealing just enough of the shape to tease the mind. It's not hard to understand why so many people believed they were looking at something more than geology. In nature, randomness is the rule. Even the most beautiful mountain ranges are uneven, fractured, crumbled by time and weather. But the Black Pyramid seems immune to that disorder. It rises cleanly, its lines cutting through the snow like design rather than accident. From above, it resembles the pyramids of Egypt or the ruins of Mesoamerica. The same proportions, the same quiet dignity. To some, that similarity was too much to dismiss. How could nature have sculpted something so exact? Geologists, of course, have their answers. The Ellsworth Mountains, where the pyramid stands, are among the oldest ranges on the continent. Their peaks were formed by ancient tectonic forces and later carved by glaciers. Over millions of years, ice and wind wore the rock into sharp edges and smooth slopes. In places where the rock is particularly hard, erosion can reveal angular forms that look almost artificial. What seems deliberate is often just the outcome of pressure and time. A few straight lines in a random field of curves and suddenly a mountain becomes a mystery. Still, logic rarely stills fascination. The pyramid's geometry feels too pure, too precise, to fade into ordinary explanation. Even scientists admit that from certain perspectives, the resemblance to man-made architecture is startling. In aerial photographs, the structure casts a triangular shadow, perfectly aligned with the horizon. The snow at its base smooths the imperfections, making the lines cleaner, the illusion stronger. It's the kind of optical trick that blurs the border between science and wonder. In the white desert of Antarctica, even small irregularities stand out. A mountain with sharp angles becomes a monument simply by contrast. The continent is vast and mostly featureless, an expanse of white plains and rolling ice. To find something dark and geometric amid that emptiness feels like discovering a secret signature in nature's handwriting, a single anomaly in an otherwise endless canvas of sameness. That's why the mind holds on to it, why people can't stop returning to the image. The pyramid is not just a shape, it's a promise that something intentional might exist in the last place untouched by intention. When explorers and satellite teams first mapped the Ellsworth Range, they were astonished by its size and structure. The mountains rise more than 3,000 meters above the ice sheet, their bases buried deep below. Hidden beneath them are valleys carved by glaciers older than recorded history. These peaks have seen the world freeze and thaw countless times. It's possible that the pyramid-shaped mountain was once surrounded by others that have since eroded away, leaving behind only this strange survivor, a natural relic shaped by wind and time into something that mimics design. But possibility rarely satisfies the imagination. To those who see meaning in geometry, the pyramid represents more than coincidence. The shape itself carries history. Triangular monuments appear across cultures, across ages, separated by oceans and millennia. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built over 4,000 years ago, aligns almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. The Mayan pyramids of Central America were aligned with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, eclipses. Even in Asia, step pyramids and mounds echo the same proportions. That repetition across civilizations has long inspired theories of a shared ancient knowledge, a universal geometry embedded in human consciousness. So when a similar form appears in Antarctica, it taps into that lineage of mystery. It feels like part of the same pattern, as though an ancient blueprint were hidden within the Earth itself, repeating across continents and epochs. Some theorists have gone so far as to suggest that the Antarctic pyramid aligns not just visually, but mathematically with others across the globe. They trace imaginary lines connecting Giza, Teotihuacan, and the icebound mountain, forming networks of symmetry and proportion that seem too elegant to be random. Whether coincidence or design, those alignments add a quiet poetry to the mystery, a geometry that ties together human history and the frozen unknown. Skeptics point out rightly that the mind loves patterns even where none exist. Pareidolia, the tendency to see meaningful shapes in random data, is one of the most persistent quirks of human perception. It's what makes us see faces in the moon or animals in clouds. In Antarctica's case, the effect is amplified by scale. The photographs show immense landscapes flattened into 2 dimensions. Shadows and angles can easily mislead the eye. What seems precise may be jagged and irregular when seen from the ground. Yet even acknowledging that, the fascination remains. Because behind the illusion lies a deeper truth. Geometry feels human. It feels like communication. A triangle suggests measurement, construction, intelligence. Even if the pyramid is a natural peak, its form resonates with our sense of order. It tells us, in some quiet way, that the universe can shape itself into meaning without our help. And perhaps that's just as wondrous as any lost civilization. For those who have actually stood near the Ellsworth Range, the sight is both humbling and strange. The air is so clear it seems thinner than glass. The horizon stretches forever, interrupted only by peaks that look like frozen sails. When sunlight hits the ice, the entire world turns blinding white. In that brilliance, shadows become pure geometry, black against gold, absolute against the infinite. It's easy to see how a mountain could appear sculpted, how nature could mimic architecture without ever intending to. The play of light in the polar regions is unlike anywhere else. It bends, reflects, distorts. It can turn an ordinary ridge into a monolith. Still, even knowing all that, the mind lingers on the image. The Black Pyramid refuses to dissolve completely into geology. Perhaps it's because it stands in a place so utterly empty that any sign of design feels miraculous. The contrast between the white void and the dark triangle is almost symbolic. Chaos and order, nature and artifice, silence and structure. It's the same duality that has haunted human thought for centuries. The pyramid embodies that tension. It looks both natural and deliberate, ancient yet eternal. Over the years, new images have been captured from different angles. Each time the shape shifts slightly, its edges less precise, its mystery both diminished and renewed. Those who believe point to the consistency of the overall form. Those who doubt highlight the imperfections. But both sides agree on one thing. The mountain is real. It exists. It stands alone in one of the most desolate regions on Earth, silent and immense. What it represents depends entirely on the eye of the observer. For some, it's a monument left by forgotten architects who walked the Earth before history began. For others, it's proof of how imagination transforms reality, how a simple mountain can become a symbol of the unknown. Either way, its geometry continues to inspire. It reminds us that the boundary between nature and design is thinner than we think. A triangle carved by time can evoke the same awe as one built by human hands, and in Antarctica that awe deepens with every mile of ice. The white desert amplifies everything: sound, light, emotion. When the wind stops, the silence feels physical, pressing against the ears. The sheer absence of life magnifies every detail. A shadow on the snow becomes a presence. A ridge becomes a structure. In that environment, geometry takes on weight. It feels like intention, even when it's only the result of erosion. The Black Pyramid has, in a way, become a lesson in perception. It shows how easily belief can grow from image alone. Yet it also shows how our fascination with form never fades. Every civilization that ever built a pyramid did so for the same reason: to reach upward, to give shape to faith, to make the invisible visible. Whether the Antarctic pyramid is real or not, it stirs the same impulse. It makes us look at the frozen wilderness and imagine purpose. That's what makes the image linger long after it's explained. Even when you know the science, you can't quite let go of the feeling that maybe, just maybe, there's something beneath that ice, something designed, waiting, buried by time and snow. The thought is almost comforting. It suggests that humanity is not the first to build, to wonder, to leave marks on the earth, that others may have come before, and that the evidence of their existence still sleeps under the world's last veil of white. And perhaps that's the real meaning of geometry in the wild. It bridges the gap between the known and the unknown. It gives the imagination a foothold in places that defy comprehension. The Black Pyramid stands, whether by accident or intention, As a monument to that bridge, a shape in the snow that refuses to be ordinary, a reminder that even in the most barren landscape, the mind finds meaning. As the years pass and technology advances, more of Antarctica is mapped with precision. Radar images cut through the ice, revealing what lies beneath. Scientists catalogue mountains, valleys, and hidden lakes. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of Earth's frozen heart. Yet even amid this growing clarity, the pyramid's allure endures. It's as though explanation itself cannot melt its mystery. The geometry persists, both real and imagined, standing quietly in the white desert. And so the story continues to drift, from photograph to screen, from skeptic to believer, from science to dream. The Black Pyramid may not be carved stone, but it has carved its place in modern myth. It reminds us that the world still has edges where imagination and evidence overlap, where the mind sees both nature and design at once. Somewhere in that convergence between the hard truth of geology and the soft wonder of possibility lies the beauty of the unknown. The White Desert is full of such convergences, lines drawn by wind, light shaped by time, meaning sculpted by silence. The pyramid is simply the one that caught our attention first, the one that asked the quiet question no one can stop asking. What else might be hidden there, under all that ice? As the wind moves over the continent and the snow begins to drift again, the mountain's shadow lengthens. From orbit it looks the same as it always has, a dark triangle against infinity. The cameras capture it, the world sees it, and for a moment humanity feels the same pulse that once drove explorers across oceans and deserts. That quiet sense of wonder that comes from realizing there are still places where reason meets its limit, where geometry becomes mystery, and where even the most ordinary mountain can look for an instant like a monument built by hands we've long forgotten. If you could peel away Antarctica's endless white skin, you would find a world almost no one has seen, a world buried not for centuries but for millions of years. The ice that covers it isn't thin or fragile. In many places it's more than 2 miles deep, pressing down with a weight so immense it reshapes the crust of the Earth itself. That weight has carved valleys, drowned mountains, and sealed entire landscapes in silence. Everything that was once alive there now sleeps beneath a frozen ceiling. What lies under that ceiling is the question that has haunted explorers and scientists alike for generations. The ice sheet of Antarctica is the largest single block of ice on the planet. It contains nearly 70% of all the fresh water on Earth. Beneath it, there's an entire topography that no map from the surface could ever reveal. Mountain ranges, plains, canyons, and even lakes, all hidden beneath the solid white. It's a second world under the first, one shaped not by wind or rain, but by pressure, temperature, and time. When satellites began to use radar capable of penetrating the ice, what they found stunned even the most cautious researchers. Beneath the featureless surface lies a landscape more dramatic than many found above ground elsewhere on Earth. At the centre of this buried world is the Gambutsev mountain range, a chain as long as the Alps, its peaks rising to nearly 3,000 metres, yet not a single summit visible above the ice. It is entirely hidden, entombed for at least 30 million years. When scientists first detected it using radar in the 1950s, they were stunned. Mountains are usually formed where the Earth's crust collides or rifts apart. But this range sits in the middle of the continent, far from tectonic boundaries. Its origin is still uncertain. Some believe it's a remnant of an ancient orogeny, a word geologists use for the birth of mountains, frozen in time by the glaciers that later covered it. Others think it might be much younger, shaped by volcanic heat beneath the ice. Whatever its origin, it exists in total darkness, surrounded by pressure and cold, waiting beneath 2 miles of silence. To imagine what it looks like down there is almost impossible. The ice itself acts like glass, distorting the radar signals that pass through it. Scientists have to interpret patterns and echoes, turning faint lines on a screen into maps of a hidden world. Those maps show valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, filled not with water or stone, but with frozen time. In those valleys, ancient rivers once flowed before the continent froze. Some of those riverbeds still exist, preserved like imprints in a fossil, their courses marked by subtle changes in the density of the ice above them. It's as if the continent remembers the sound of water long after the last drop turned to ice. And yet, even beneath that unimaginable weight, water still moves. Between the rock and the ice lies a thin layer where the pressure is so great that it melts the bottom of the glacier. That meltwater flows slowly through hidden channels, pooling in basins and forming secret lakes sealed away from sunlight. Some of these lakes are enormous. Lake Vostok, the largest, stretches nearly 250 kilometres in length and covers an area roughly the size of Lake Ontario. It's been isolated for millions of years, protected from the freezing temperatures above by the insulation of the ice. When scientists finally drilled down to reach it in 2012, the world held its breath. For decades, Lake Vostok had existed only as theory and measurement. The idea of an entire ecosystem surviving under the ice was almost too extraordinary to believe. But as the borehole pierced the final layers and samples were lifted to the surface, the evidence became undeniable. There were microbes alive down there, tiny ancient organisms that had somehow adapted to a world of total darkness, immense pressure, and near zero oxygen. They were feeding on minerals leached from the rock, thriving in isolation. In that discovery, the boundaries of life shifted. If such organisms can survive under the Antarctic ice, sealed away for millions of years, then life itself may be far more resilient than we once imagined. The implications stretch far beyond this planet. Mars with its polar ice caps, or Europa, the frozen moon of Jupiter with oceans hidden beneath ice. They might not be barren after all. The story of what lives under Antarctica becomes a whisper of what might live elsewhere in the cosmos. But the life found beneath the ice isn't just biological, it's geological, hydrological, and magnetic. The rock below the continent hums with activity. Seismic readings show that Antarctica is not entirely still. Deep faults run beneath the ice, shifting slowly as the planet breathes. There are volcanoes buried under the glaciers, some still active. Mount Erebus, one of the few that breaks the surface, burns quietly at the edge of the continent, its lava lake glowing red against the white sky. But there are others hidden far beneath the ice. Scientists have detected heat sources that melt the base of the glaciers from below, sending plumes of warm water through the frozen layers. Some have suggested that one of these hidden volcanoes lies not far from where the supposed pyramid stands. Whether or not that's true, the thought adds another layer to the mystery. That fire might sleep beneath the coldest place on Earth. The presence of heat beneath the ice is crucial. Without it, the glaciers would be locked solid from top to bottom. Instead, that faint warmth allows water to flow, creating the dynamic system scientists call subglacial hydrology. This network of hidden rivers and lakes acts as a lubricant, helping the ice sheets move across the bedrock. It's a world in slow motion, measured not in seconds or minutes, but in centuries. The water may travel miles over hundreds of years, carving new paths in the darkness. Some lakes fill and drain cyclically, like the slow pulse of a buried heart. To study this world, scientists rely on radar, gravity measurements, and seismic vibrations. Every tool has its limits. The signals bounce, bend, and scatter, sometimes creating shapes that aren't really there. A dense patch of rock might appear as a void, a smooth valley as a solid mass. In that confusion, imagination sometimes steps in. The Black Pyramid, many say, might be one such illusion, a product of radar shadows or topographical distortion. But the mystery endures because Antarctica's ice is not static. It's alive, shifting constantly. What looks like a mountain today might be swallowed tomorrow, or revealed anew when the ice moves again. For millions of years, these hidden landscapes have remained untouched by sunlight. The air above them is ancient, trapped in bubbles that preserve the atmosphere of past ages. Scientists studying ice cores from these depths have found traces of volcanic eruptions, cosmic dust, and even bacteria carried by winds from distant continents. Each layer is a frozen memory, a record of the Earth's changing breath. As they drill deeper, they move further back in time, approaching eras when the world's climate was entirely different. The deepest ice cores ever extracted reach back nearly 1 million years, but geologists believe that deeper layers, those lying just above the rock itself, could hold secrets even older. In those sediments may be pollen from extinct forests, or the mineral residue of ancient rivers. There might even be fossilized remains of plants or microorganisms that thrived before the freeze began. In that sense, Antarctica is the planet's greatest time capsule, preserving both life and landscape in perfect stillness. The surface of the continent tells only half the story. The ice is the face of Antarctica, but its soul lies beneath, and that soul, though unseen, continues to shape the world above it. The immense weight of the ice presses down on the rock, deforming it, creating basins where meltwater gathers. When the ice thins or shifts, the ground rebounds slowly, like a mattress rising after pressure is lifted. This phenomenon, called isostatic rebound, reveals that the continent is not static, but in constant dialogue with the ice that covers it. It bends, it breathes, it changes. Beneath that frozen silence, the Earth is still alive. The scale of it all defies imagination. Standing on the surface, surrounded by white emptiness, it's hard to believe that 2 miles below your feet there are mountains as tall as the Rockies, rivers that still flow, and volcanoes that still burn. The air is so thin, the horizon so endless, that it feels as though the world itself has stopped. But deep below, movement continues, glacial, patient, eternal. The continent is both dead and living, both frozen and fluid. It's no wonder then that people look at this place and sense something beyond science. The idea that such a vast and complex world could exist unseen touches something instinctive. It reminds us how little of the planet we truly know. For all our technology, we've explored less than 1% of Antarctica's subglacial terrain. The rest remains untouched, unmeasured, and perhaps unimaginable. The ice keeps its secrets well. Some researchers believe that beneath certain regions, there may be entire ecosystems sealed away, not just microbial but multicellular, tiny crustaceans, worms, or plants adapted to the darkness. Others think that massive caverns might exist, hollowed by geothermal heat, containing air pockets and liquid water. One such cavity, discovered by radar beneath the Pine Island Glacier, was described as the size of Manhattan. Its roof of ice was melting rapidly, hinting at a complex interaction of heat, water, and pressure below. These voids, these spaces between worlds, capture the same fascination as the Black Pyramid itself. They're reminders that the unknown is not far away. It's directly beneath our feet. If you could descend into that underworld, past the solid blue walls of compressed ice, you'd enter an environment unlike anything else on Earth. The temperature would hover just below freezing, the darkness absolute. The pressure would be immense, the silence overwhelming. Yet in that silence, the planet's slow heartbeat would be everywhere. The creak of shifting glaciers, the drip of meltwater, the rumble of distant rock. Down there, time would feel different. A minute might stretch into an eternity, the same way it does in deep space. The air, if there were any, would taste of ancient minerals. Every sense would strain to recognize life, sound, motion. It's easy to understand why myths of hidden civilizations persist. The thought of a world so completely buried, so perfectly preserved, invites the imagination to populate it. If nature can create mountains that mimic pyramids and rivers that flow unseen for eons, why couldn't it also hide the remnants of something more deliberate? An ancient city sealed beneath the ice, a memory from a time when Antarctica was green and habitable. To most scientists, this is fantasy. But even fantasy has its purpose. It keeps curiosity alive. In truth, what lies beneath the ice is more extraordinary than fiction. The interplay of rock, water and pressure forms a system that scientists are only beginning to understand. Some of the subglacial lakes are connected through channels, creating what could be called an underground watershed. When one fills, another drains. This movement, though slow, may influence how glaciers slide toward the sea. It's a hidden mechanism driving the behaviour of the entire continent. Even global sea levels, in part, respond to the rhythms of water that no one can see. And still, for all the data, all the mapping, there's always the possibility of surprise. Every new discovery beneath the ice challenges what we thought we knew. In that sense, Antarctica is a mirror of human knowledge itself. Vast, mostly uncharted, with flashes of understanding glowing like lanterns in the dark. When the Black Pyramid story resurfaced, many scientists dismissed it quickly. But privately, a few admitted that the notion of structures hidden under the ice wasn't entirely absurd. Not alien, not ancient, but geological. Volcanoes, mineral formations, fossilized ridges, remnants of a pre-glacial world. In their own way, these are monuments too, built not by hands but by time. They remind us that architecture doesn't always need architects. Sometimes the earth itself sculpts beauty. As the ice continues to shift and thin in some regions, new areas of bedrock are being exposed. Each revelation brings with it the possibility of discovery. Fossil forests have already been found in certain exposed valleys, their trunks preserved in permafrost like statues. Some are over 200 million years old, the remnants of trees that once stood in the Antarctic sun. Those forests suggest a past almost beyond imagination, a time when this land was alive, green, and filled with sound. Beneath the ice, that world is still there, perfectly entombed. The deeper scientists look, the clearer it becomes that Antarctica isn't simply frozen, it's layered. Each layer tells a different story, of warmth, of flood, of extinction. The ice may seem eternal, but it's only a chapter. Beneath it lies everything that came before. Every measurement taken, every radar image captured, every echo returned from the depths adds a new line to that story. And with each discovery, the idea of what might lie hidden grows a little more real. So when we think of the Black Pyramid and the mystery it represents, perhaps we're not just imagining stone under the snow. Perhaps we're feeling the echo of that buried world, the one that lies 2 miles below, silent but not gone. It's the same feeling that comes from staring into the night sky or standing at the edge of an ocean, the sense that beneath the visible surface, something vast continues unseen. The ice may one day melt. It has before, and it will again. When that happens, the buried landscape will return to light, and whatever sleeps beneath will wake. Whether it's mountain, ruin, or memory, the world will see it for the first time in millions of years. Until then, it waits in silence, a secret kept by the coldest, oldest heart of the earth. Long before satellites traced the white outline of Antarctica, before icebreakers and research stations, before even telescopes could pierce the winter sky of the southern hemisphere, there were maps, old fragile maps drawn by hand, ink on parchment, the product of memory, hearsay and imagination. Some were attempts to make sense of the known world. Others ventured into the unknown, sketching continents that had never been seen. Among these strange relics of early geography lies one of the most persistent enigmas in cartographic history, a map that seems to show Antarctica centuries before its discovery, not as a frozen wasteland, but as a land of rivers, mountains and open coastlines. The map in question was drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. He was a sailor, a scholar, and a collector of knowledge from every port he visited. His chart of the world combined information from ancient sources, Greek, Arabic, and possibly even older ones now lost, with data gathered from the early voyages of European explorers. The result was an extraordinary mosaic of geography, both familiar and strange. On the surface, it shows the coasts of South America and Africa with surprising accuracy for its time. But near the bottom of the map, where early navigators believed the world might hold a southern continent to balance the northern ones, there appears a landmass that has drawn endless fascination. That southern land, labelled Terra Australis, is depicted not as an abstract idea, but as a detailed coastline, complete with mountain ranges and rivers. For centuries it was dismissed as conjecture, a guess at what must exist to complete the globe's symmetry. But in the 20th century, when scientists mapped the actual outline of Antarctica beneath its ice, using seismic and radar data, something unsettling emerged. Parts of the Piri Reis coastline appeared to resemble the shape of Antarctica's Queen Maud Land, as it would look without ice. The resemblance, though partial, was enough to ignite one of the longest-running debates in historical cartography. How could a 16th century sailor, relying on charts inherited from earlier ages, have drawn an accurate representation of a continent that would not be officially sighted until the 19th century, and an ice-free version at that? Skeptics insist it was coincidence, a case of mistaken identity where South America was drawn too far east and blended into the imagined southern continent. But others see in it something more, a fragment of memory that survived the collapse of an older world. If the Piri Reis map was the only one, it might have faded into curiosity, but it was not alone. Other maps from the 15th and 16th centuries show strange southern lands sketched with similar detail. The Orontius Phineas map of 1531, the Haji Ahmed map of 1559, and the Boache map of the 18th century. Each seems to preserve in varying degrees outlines that echo the true form of Antarctica's subglacial features. Some even depict rivers and mountain ranges that match those discovered by radar centuries later. Whether those similarities are coincidence or continuity, they remain difficult to dismiss entirely. For those who believe that the Antarctic Pyramid marks the site of a forgotten civilization, these maps are often cited as the first clues. They are treated as artifacts of memory, not just human memory, but civilizational memory, the lingering trace of a world that once knew the South Pole as a temperate place. The idea is not new. The notion of a lost land in the southern hemisphere predates the age of exploration by millennia. Ancient Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Ptolemy speculated about a counter-Earth, a landmass balancing the northern continents. Medieval scholars inherited that belief, filling their maps with artistic interpretations of southern territories populated by strange beasts and unknown peoples. But what if those myths, as some have argued, were echoes of genuine geography, remembered from an age before the ice? Science, cautious and methodical, offers its own timeline. According to geological records, Antarctica has been covered in ice for roughly 34 million years. The last time its coastlines were free of ice sheets was during the Eocene epoch, long before humans appeared. But even within that deep timescale, there were warmer interglacial periods when parts of the continent's margins might have been open and green. It's possible that small regions of land along the coast were habitable, if only briefly. Still, the thought that any record of such a time could survive into human history stretches beyond conventional understanding. Yet maps are strange things. They are both history and interpretation, both record and imagination. A map doesn't just describe geography, it tells a story about what its maker believed. The Piri Reis map, like all maps of its era, was compiled from fragments. Many of those fragments came from older charts, copied and recopied through generations. Some of those older sources may have dated back to the classical world, or even earlier. If any of them preserved information from a time when coastlines looked different, perhaps from oral traditions of sailors who travelled far south, those echoes could have survived, distorted but not lost. In that sense, the map could be both artifact and myth, a translation of memory across centuries. In 1960, a US Air Force cartographer named Charles Hapgood brought the Piri Reis map back into the public eye. He argued that it showed Antarctica as it existed before it froze, suggesting that some unknown civilization must have charted the continent thousands of years earlier. His theory, called Earth crust displacement, proposed that the outer shell of the planet occasionally shifts, moving continents into new positions almost overnight. According to Hapgood, Antarctica might once have been located farther north, in a temperate climate, before sliding to its current polar position during one of these cataclysmic shifts. His ideas were bold, controversial, and ultimately unproven, but they captured the imagination of writers, explorers, and researchers for decades. Even Albert Einstein, known for his skepticism, reviewed Hapgood's work and found its creativity intriguing, though unconvincing. To most geologists, the concept of crustal displacement is impossible on that scale. The movement of continents is real, but it happens over millions of years, not within a single generation. Still, the idea that the Earth's surface can change so profoundly resonates with a deeper truth. The planet has never been static. Continents drift, seas rise and fall, climates shift from tropical to frozen. In that constant motion, the line between myth and geology blurs. Perhaps what ancient people remembered as a lost paradise was simply a world reshaped by ice and time. The persistence of these maps in human imagination reveals something profound about how we perceive history. When we encounter an artifact that doesn't fit our timeline, we have two choices: to dismiss it as error or to expand our sense of what's possible. Most scholars choose the first path, protecting the coherence of the known. But for those drawn to mystery, the maps represent a bridge between worlds, between the documented and the forgotten. They are like whispers from a dream that refuses to fade even after waking. In recent years, technology has given us tools that the old map makers could never have imagined. High-resolution satellite imaging, ice-penetrating radar, and gravitational mapping have revealed Antarctica's subglacial contours in extraordinary detail. When those modern maps are compared with the old ones, the differences are obvious, yet the similarities remain haunting. A mountain ridge here, a curve of coastline there, small overlaps that keep the question alive. Are they accidents of imagination, or coincidences born of how coastlines naturally form? Or are they the faintest traces of something remembered? Beyond the debate lies a quieter observation. Humanity has always had a strange relationship with its own memory. We write histories and myths to keep what we've learned from vanishing, yet over time even our records fade, our libraries burn, our languages die. The past becomes a jigsaw puzzle missing most of its pieces. Every map, every artifact, every ruin we uncover is like a glimpse through fog, and sometimes, in that fog, we see shapes that remind us of things we can't quite explain. Pyramids in the snow, continents that shouldn't exist, maps that show the world as it once might have been. Whether the Piri Reis map depicts Antarctica or not, it has already accomplished something remarkable. It has connected minds across centuries, from the sailors of the Ottoman Empire to modern scientists and dreamers, staring at satellite images on their screens. It has turned geography into a kind of poetry, the poetry of curiosity, of wanting to know what came before. Every line drawn by that ancient hand carries the tremor of exploration, the same hunger that drives modern researchers across the ice today. The deeper meaning of the map may not be about proof at all. It may be about continuity, the way human imagination persists across time. When Piri Reis compiled his chart, he wasn't thinking about ancient civilizations or future controversies. He was trying to make sense of the world with the tools he had. In doing so, he joined a lineage that stretches back to the first person who looked at the horizon and wondered what lay beyond it. The map's endurance shows how that wonder survives every age of certainty. Somewhere in a museum, under controlled light, the parchment still exists. Its edges are frayed, its ink faded, but the outlines remain. You can trace them with your eyes, the coasts, the seas, the strange southern land that may or may not be what it seems. It's easy to imagine the admiral himself hunched over it 500 years ago, surrounded by charts, logs, and whispered stories from sailors who claim to have seen impossible lands. Outside, the sea wind would have been rattling the ship masts, carrying the smell of salt and the sound of gulls. The world then was still full of mystery, still open to discovery. Perhaps that's the part we miss most. Today, our maps are exact. Every coastline, every island, every current is charted. There are no more blank spaces, and yet, in some quiet way, that completeness feels smaller. The old maps, with their mistakes and wonders, left room for dreams. They turned ignorance into possibility. In that sense, the Piri Reis map and the myth of the Antarctic pyramid share the same soul. Both remind us that even in a world of precision, there's a part of us that longs for the unknown. The forgotten maps, the ancient coastlines, the faint echoes of memory. They aren't just about geography. They're about how knowledge survives, how it transforms, how it hides itself inside stories until we're ready to look again. Whether drawn by the hand of a 16th century admiral or whispered across millennia by the ice itself, these traces point toward a truth we often overlook. The past is never really gone. It just waits, buried beneath layers of time, the way continents sleep beneath their glaciers. And as modern scientists stand on the same continent that Piri Reis once imagined, drilling through miles of ice, mapping invisible mountains, and discovering life where none should exist, they become, unknowingly, part of the same story. A story of searching, of remembering, of piecing together a world that refuses to stay silent. The maps were never wrong, not entirely. They were simply incomplete, glimpses of a reality that only now, with all our instruments and patience, we are beginning to see. When people look at the Black Pyramid and the ancient maps side by side, they see reflections of the same impulse, to believe that the Earth still holds memories older than humanity, that somewhere under the ice, beneath all the white silence, there is a trace of a world that has not yet finished speaking. The pyramids may not be real, the maps may not be accurate, but both keep the same flame alive, the conviction that there is always something left to find, something just beyond the reach of certainty. As the ice shifts and the wind whispers across the pole, the lines of those old maps seem to blur into the present, merging imagination with evidence. The past and the future, the known and the unknown all meet there, beneath the same frozen horizon. The Black Pyramid stands at that crossroads, a silent reminder that memory, like ice, preserves what time alone would erase. For as long as the world has been mapped, people have dreamed of continents that vanished, lands swallowed by oceans, empires erased by floods, civilizations buried under asher ice. They go by many names: Lemuria, Mu, High Brazil, and the one that endures above all others, Atlantis. The story of a great land that sank beneath the waves has haunted human thought for more than 2,000 years. It has crossed languages, religions, and centuries, reshaped by every generation that told it. And for some, that story has found its final resting place at the bottom of the world, beneath the frozen stillness of Antarctica. Atlantis began, at least in recorded history, with Plato. Around 360 BCE, in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he described an island civilization that existed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the strait we now call Gibraltar. It was, he wrote, larger than Libya and Asia combined, a land of extraordinary wealth and knowledge. Its people built magnificent cities, engineered vast canals, and harnessed the forces of nature. But their pride, Plato said, grew faster than their wisdom. The gods punished them, and in a single night of storms and earthquakes the island sank into the sea. To most scholars, Plato's story was allegory, a moral lesson about hubris, not a record of history. Yet even in ancient times there were those who wondered if he'd been describing something real, a memory passed down from older civilizations. In the centuries that followed, explorers searched the known seas for traces of the lost world. The legend migrated from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean, from the coasts of Africa to the Caribbean, adapting to each new frontier. Every unexplored horizon became a possible Atlantis. By the time the Great Age of Exploration reached its height, the southern hemisphere was still largely unknown. The maps of the time showed a vast, uncharted continent stretching across the bottom of the world, Terra Australis Incognita. It was a blank space where anything could exist. Philosophers imagined it as a counterbalance to the northern continents. Sailors spoke of warm breezes blowing from the south, as if from lands untouched by ice. To some, this was the natural home of Atlantis, a paradise lost to the deep freeze. When explorers finally began to reach the Antarctic Circle in the 18th and 19th centuries, they found not the lush forests of legend, but a landscape of endless white. Even so, the idea of a buried civilization did not fade. If anything, it adapted. What if, some began to ask, the continent had not always been frozen? What if, before the ice came, this had been the home of a people who left behind no trace but the faint geometry of stone beneath the glaciers? In the 20th century, as the story of the Black Pyramid took shape, it merged almost naturally with the Atlantis myth. The idea of an advanced culture lost to time fit neatly with the image of a structure rising from the Antarctic snow. For believers, this was more than coincidence. It was continuity, the final link in a chain of forgotten worlds. The pyramid became a monument not just to mystery, but to memory. It suggested that the legend of Atlantis might be rooted not in the sea, but in the ice. There were reasons, at least superficially, to find the connection appealing. Geological evidence shows that Antarctica was not always where it is today. Hundreds of millions of years ago, it was part of the supercontinent Gondwana, which included South America, Africa, and Australia. As the continents drifted apart, Antarctica slowly moved toward the pole. There were periods, long after that, when the planet's climate warmed, melting parts of the ice and revealing rock and coastline. It's not impossible that some regions of the continent were ice-free within the last few million years, long before humans, but recent enough to leave traces in the planet's memory. Those who see Atlantis in the south argue that human civilization may be far older than we think. They point to ancient monuments around the world that seem to appear fully formed, with no clear precursors. The pyramids of Egypt, the megaliths of South America, the temples of Mesopotamia. They suggest that these were fragments of an earlier knowledge, survivors of a catastrophe that wiped out its source. If that lost source had once been in Antarctica, its rediscovery would change everything we know about human history. Mainstream science, of course, finds no evidence to support such claims. The archaeological record shows no trace of human habitation on the continent. The ice cores and sediments tell a different story, one of slow glaciation, not sudden catastrophe. But even so, the human mind keeps reaching for the possibility. The legend persists not because it's proven, but because it fills a space that science has yet to illuminate completely. The unknown becomes a canvas for imagination, and Antarctica, with its vast emptiness, is the perfect canvas. Every generation has its own version of Atlantis. In the Renaissance, it was a reflection of the ideal state, a place of harmony and reason. In the Enlightenment, it became a symbol of human progress lost to ignorance. In the 20th century, it took on a new form, a technological paradise destroyed by its own power, mirroring modern anxieties about nuclear war and environmental collapse. When people began to speculate about ancient civilizations beneath the Antarctic ice, they were really expressing a familiar hope, that knowledge lost could someday be found again. The myth of Atlantis also carries something deeply human, the idea that history is cyclical, that civilizations rise, flourish, and fall, only to leave traces for others to find. It's a comforting story in a way. It suggests that destruction is not final, that even after disaster something endures. The thought that beneath Antarctica's miles of ice there might be cities monuments, or even artifact preserved by cold rather than erased by time, feels like a form of continuity, a link to an age when the world was different. There's also the matter of memory itself, not just human memory, but geological memory. The Earth records its past in layers, just as human culture records its stories. Fossils, ice cores and magnetic fields preserve moments in deep time. In that sense, the planet has its own archaeology, one we're only beginning to decipher. The lost continent hypothesis is a way of merging those two forms of memory, mythic and material, into a single idea. Atlantis becomes not just a place, but a metaphor for everything buried by time. In the mid-20th century, a number of writers began to popularise the link between Antarctica and Atlantis. Books appeared with titles like Earth's Shifting Crust and When the Sky Fell, suggesting that sudden geological upheavals could have moved entire continents, freezing one and drowning another. The idea appealed to a world newly aware of its own fragility, a world living under the shadow of global conflict and atomic fear. If civilization could destroy itself once, perhaps it had done so before. The ice, in that story, was both grave and guardian. A tomb that preserved the evidence of what came before. Even as scientists dismissed these theories, they acknowledged something about their appeal. Antarctica is a place where the boundary between the possible and the impossible feels thin. It's a continent that hides more than it reveals, where facts are scarce and speculation thrives. Every expedition, every discovery, every anomaly seems to add fuel to the fire of imagination. The idea that an advanced civilization could have lived there in some forgotten epoch may be scientifically implausible, but it speaks to a deeper truth, our unwillingness to believe that we are the first or the only ones to wonder. There's also a subtle irony in how science itself feeds the legend it tries to disprove. The more researchers uncover beneath the ice, the mountain ranges, the subglacial lakes, the volcanic heat, the more the public imagination expands to fill the gaps. Each new discovery confirms that the continent is more complex than we thought, that it is not merely a flat, frozen plain, but a dynamic, living system. That complexity leaves room for stories. When facts stop short, myths continue the journey. The Black Pyramid, in this sense, is the latest incarnation of an ancient longing. It embodies the desire to see pattern and purpose in the random, to find history even in the inhuman landscape of ice. It is both a physical mystery and psychological one, a reflection of how the mind transforms curiosity into belief. The shape itself is timeless, connecting the frozen south to the deserts of Egypt and the jungles of Central America. Each pyramid, whether carved by hand or by nature, tells the same silent story, that humanity seeks order, even in the wilderness. Some scientists studying the ice cores of Antarctica have noted thin layers of ash, traces of global fires or volcanic eruptions that darken the skies tens of thousands of years ago. These layers mark moments of sudden change, of environmental upheaval. In mythic language, they are the fingerprints of cataclysm, the floods and earthquakes of legend. It's easy to see how memories of such events could echo down through generations, eventually taking the form of the Atlantis story. What begins as natural disaster ends as cautionary tale. The difference is only time. Even today, as we scan the Antarctic ice with radar and satellites, there's a feeling that the continent might one day answer back. Each new layer of data reveals another detail of its hidden world, an ancient lake here, a buried mountain there, and each discovery feels like a whisper from something older than history. The line between science and myth narrows, not because the facts change, but because our sense of wonder remains the same. The legend of Atlantis, wherever it truly belongs, continues to evolve with us. When people look at the Black Pyramid and imagine it as a relic of a drowned civilization, they are not rejecting science, they are extending it, stretching the timeline, expanding the narrative, allowing the unknown to breathe a little longer before it's closed off by certainty. The myth survives because it offers a space where both reason and imagination can coexist. And perhaps that's the quiet purpose of all lost continent stories. They remind us that discovery is not just about finding new places, but about recovering forgotten ones. Every generation thinks it knows the world completely until something emerges from the deep or the ice to remind us otherwise. Atlantis may never be found, but its echo ensures we never stop looking. If one were to stand today at the edge of the Antarctic plateau, feeling the cold bite of the wind and staring out across miles of unbroken white, it would be easy to dismiss such stories as fantasy. Yet beneath those miles of ice lies an entire world unseen, valleys carved by rivers long vanished, lakes sealed for millions of years, mountain ranges taller than the Alps. The fact that we know so little about that hidden world makes it fertile ground for imagination. The myth of the southern Atlantis is not about geography. It's about the persistence of mystery. As the Black Pyramid stands silhouetted against the endless horizon, whether as rock or illusion, it carries the same energy as the story that began with Plato. It's a mirror reflecting the eternal human question. Where did we come from, and what have we forgotten along the way? The ice holds its secrets tightly, but it cannot hold them forever. When it melts, as it has before and will again, perhaps the Earth will show us what we've been searching for, or perhaps it will only reveal more questions. Either way, the longing will remain, as steady as the wind that sweeps across the southern pole, whispering through the cold that memory is never truly lost, only waiting to be found again. When the story of the Black Pyramid began to circulate, scientists reacted the way they always do when confronted with mystery, with curiosity first and then with caution. To the public, the photographs were proof of something astonishing. To geologists, they were a familiar challenge, the kind of image that invites wonder but demands context. What looks extraordinary from a distance can often be explained by time, erosion, and the subtle architecture of nature itself. Still, even in their explanations, there was a trace of respect. Antarctica is not a place that gives up its secrets easily. The first step in understanding the so-called pyramid was to place it in its environment. The formation lies within the Ellsworth Mountains, a range that runs for more than 300 kilometres across the western part of the continent. These mountains are remnants of an ancient uplift, their roots buried deep under ice. The peaks that break through the surface are called nunataks, isolated summits that rise above the surrounding glacier like islands in a frozen sea. They're among the only parts of Antarctica where bare rock is visible. When wind and temperature carve away at these nunataks, they often produce sharp ridges and angular slopes. What the internet saw as a perfect pyramid, geologists recognized as a textbook example of glacial erosion. The process begins over millions of years. As ice moves, it grinds against the rock beneath it, carrying small fragments that act like sandpaper. The glaciers follow natural lines of weakness, cracks, faults, or fractures in the rock. Over time, this relentless abrasion carves out valleys and leaves behind peaks with steep triangular faces known as horns. The famous Matterhorn in the Alps is a classic example of the same process. From certain angles, it looks almost artificially symmetrical, its ridges meeting in crisp edges as though sculpted by design. Yet it is purely the work of nature, a monument built by pressure, temperature, and time. The Black Pyramid of Antarctica, they explained, belongs to that same family. The supposed structure's coordinates point to a peak called Mount Goodwin-Austen, one of many in the range shaped by converging glaciers. From one perspective, its sides appear evenly inclined. From another, they break into irregular spurs and fractures. Satellite images can exaggerate symmetry because of how light and shadow behave in polar conditions. The low angle of the sun stretches every contour, deepening contrasts and sharpening edges. A simple ridge can appear as a perfect plane. A shadow can become a line. What appears geometric is often just the trick of light filtered through the atmosphere at the bottom of the world. Still, the photographs are compelling. Even experienced scientists admit that the shape is striking. That, however, is part of the human condition. We are pattern seekers. The same instinct that helped our ancestors recognize predators in tall grass now compels us to find structure in randomness. It's called pareidolia, and it explains why we see faces in clouds, animals in rocks, and sometimes pyramids in mountains. The brain looks for order even when nature offers none. Antarctica, with its stark contrasts and extreme lighting, is a perfect stage for that illusion. When researchers examined high-resolution topographic data from the area, they found that the pyramid's slopes were uneven, the angles inconsistent. From the ground, it loses its perfection. There are cracks, terraces, and jagged edges hidden by snow in the photographs. The base is irregular, not square, but elliptical. To the trained eye, it is a mountain pretending to be a monument. That doesn't make it less beautiful. If anything, it deepens its mystery. Nature, after all, has always been capable of mimicking our designs long before we ever existed to create them. The scientific community's response was not dismissive, just measured. Geologists know that Antarctica's surface is full of optical surprises. The continent's cold and dryness preserve shapes that would erode quickly elsewhere. Wind polishes stone into geometric forms, ice cracks and refreezes in patterns that echo architecture. Even the snow, when blown across ridges, forms waves and steps that can resemble terraces. These illusions are everywhere, hidden in the vast monotony of white. It's not strange that one of them might resemble a pyramid. But the debate did something useful. It drew attention to Antarctica in a way few scientific papers ever could. Public fascination brought new interest in geology, glaciology, and cartography. People began to learn the language of the landscape. Nunatak, cirque, horn, arête, words that describe how ice sculpts stone. For the scientists stationed on the continent, it was a chance to share their work with an audience that rarely looked south. They explained how the ice moves like a slow river, reshaping everything beneath it. They showed radar images of subglacial mountains that make even the Black Pyramid seem small. They reminded the world that reality, when examined closely enough, is just as wondrous as myth. Yet science, for all its clarity, does not erase the allure of mystery. It only reframes it. The geologists could explain how the shape formed, but they could not stop people from wondering why it formed so precisely, or why it seems to resonate with so many others across the world. Some scientists quietly admit that they understand the fascination. Even they are drawn to the strange symmetry, the way it stands alone against the sky. In private, a few say that Antarctica still unsettles them, not because of myths, but because of how little they truly know. Despite decades of research, only a fraction of the continent has been studied in detail. Most of what we know comes from satellite data and a handful of expeditions. Beneath the ice lies a landscape mapped by radar but never seen by human eyes. Geologists can estimate what's there, but they can't touch it. That limitation leaves space for imagination. Even within scientific circles, there's an acknowledgement that some of what lies beneath the ice might surprise us. The difference between scientists and storytellers isn't that one believes in mystery and the other doesn't. It's that they define it differently. The geologist's version of mystery lives in data. It's in the patterns of ancient sediments that tell of climates long vanished, in the mineral veins that reveal how continents drifted apart, in the isotopes of ice that record the breath of prehistoric air. Every time a new core is drilled, something unexpected emerges. A fossilized fern, a volcanic ash layer, a shift in magnetic orientation. Each discovery rewrites a small part of Earth's history. In that sense, the scientific approach to Antarctica is no less romantic than the myths. It's simply quieter, slower, more patient. There's a certain poetry in the way geologists describe the landscape. They talk about time as if it were a living thing, something that presses, folds and stretches. To them, the mountains are not static monuments, but frozen moments in motion. The pyramid-shaped peak is just one frame in an endless film of geological change. It may appear eternal, but it's eroding even now, grain by grain, under the weight of ice. What the photographs capture is a single pause in that movement, a still image from a story that began hundreds of millions of years ago. And yet, even among scientists, there are whispers of awe. Those who have stood on the ice surrounded by nothing but wind and white often speak of the continent with reverence. They describe the silence as total, so complete it feels alive. They talk about the way the light shifts in the polar dusk, how shadows stretch for miles, how even the smallest features seem monumental. In that environment, it's easy to see why someone might feel the presence of something greater, not supernatural, but profound. Antarctica humbles everyone who visits. It erases the noise of certainty and leaves only questions. Skepticism in its truest form is not denial. It's the discipline of curiosity. The geologists who studied the Black Pyramid weren't trying to extinguish wonder. They were trying to understand it. For them, the pyramid was a doorway to a larger mystery. The mystery of how ice, wind and rock conspire to create beauty. In that sense, their work aligns more closely with the spirit of exploration than with the rigidity of disbelief. They too are seekers, just in a different language. Some of them find humour in the myths. During long winters at research stations, when the sun disappears for months and the wind screams across the empty plateau, scientists tell their own stories. They joke about ancient cities under the ice, about pyramids that glow at night, about the idea that they might be living above something that once lived itself. It's a way of breaking the monotony, but also of acknowledging the strangeness of their surroundings. The line between jest and wonder blurs easily in the dark. As technology improves, so does clarity. High-resolution radar and satellite imaging have since revealed that the Black Pyramid's geometry is irregular. There are dozens of similar peaks nearby, some sharper, some smoother, all formed by the same glacial forces. The data confirms what geologists long suspected. Antarctica is full of natural pyramids, sculpted not by hands but by pressure and time. The symmetry that fascinates us is just one of nature's recurring patterns, found in crystals, mountains, and even living forms. Perfection, it seems, is not proof of design. It's part of the universe's own logic. Yet for every piece of evidence, new questions emerge. Why does the continent hold such a grip on imagination? Why do its shapes inspire such conviction? Scientists studying the psychology of belief note that remote, inaccessible places often become the focus of myths because they resist verification. The less we can see, the more we can dream. Antarctica, with its vast inaccessibility, is the ultimate blank space. Its mysteries are safe precisely because they are hard to reach. For the geologists stationed there, the reality is less dramatic but no less meaningful. They rise early in the endless daylight of summer or the dim twilight of winter, check instruments, record temperatures, and calibrate sensors. Their work is slow, repetitive, often silent. But within that routine lies the joy of discovery, the realization that even a single grain of rock can rewrite what we know about Earth's past. They may not find pyramids, but they find fossils of ancient forests, evidence of tropical climates, traces of carbon that tell of life in the unlikeliest places. Each finding adds depth to the continent's story. Over time, the tension between myth and science softens. The two aren't enemies, just companions moving at different speeds. The legend of the pyramid draws attention. The science fills in the details. One feeds curiosity, the other satisfies it. Both, in their own way, honour the same instinct, the need to explore. When a geologist brushes snow off a rock face, or a technician lowers a probe into the ice, they're engaging in the same act of seeking that inspired sailors to draw imaginary continents, and philosophers to dream of Atlantis. The difference is method, not motive. And so the geologists respond, not with ridicule but with patience. They explain how the landscape forms, how ice moves, how light deceives. They show that the truth, though less sensational, is no less awe-inspiring. They remind us that we don't need lost civilizations to feel wonder. The Earth itself is enough. The slow motion of glaciers, the silence of the plateau, the fact that life endures even here, all these are miracles of a quieter kind. Still, the debate continues in the background. New images surface, new claims appear, and the cycle repeats. Scientists verify, analyse, explain. Believers reinterpret, reframe, and continue to look beyond the evidence. The conversation between the two sides is not really about proof. It's about the nature of wonder. The scientists want to understand it, the dreamers want to preserve it. Both, in their own way, are right. In the end, skepticism is not the opposite of belief, but its companion. It keeps belief honest, anchored, grounded in what can be known while leaving space for what cannot. The geologists, though often cast as the voices of reason, are themselves believers, in process, in patience, in the idea that truth reveals itself slowly, like rock emerging from beneath the melting snow. They may not see pyramids, but they see something even more enduring, the beauty of a planet that writes its history in stone and ice. And as the seasons turn and the light shift again over the white expanse, the mountain that sparked so much speculation remains unchanged. It stands exactly where it has for millions of years, indifferent to the debates that surround it. The wind carves its slopes, the snow softens its edges, and the ice slides slowly past, carrying with it the memory of all that has ever been believed about this place. The scientists continue their work, the dreamers continue their stories, and between them the continent remains, vast, silent, and still holding something back. Because even when the data is clear and the maps are complete, the feeling persists. That subtle sense that Antarctica is more than ice and rock. That somewhere beneath all the explanations there is still something we haven't yet seen. Something waiting just beyond the reach of understanding. The geologists might call that feeling curiosity. Others might call it faith. But whatever name it takes, it's what keeps us watching the white horizon, waiting for the next shadow to appear in the snow. The deeper scientists look beneath the Antarctic ice, the stranger the continent becomes. It is not only a world of frozen mountains and hidden lakes, but also a place where the planet's invisible forces behave differently. The magnetic field, which wraps around Earth like a soft shield, twists and bends in curious ways near the poles. Instruments that track its movement often drift, as though the compass itself hesitates to point true. For centuries, explorers noticed this unease, though they couldn't explain it. Their compasses spun, their instruments faltered, and their maps slipped slightly out of alignment. Somewhere under all that air, they suspected, there was more than just rock and snow. There was something in the Earth itself. The magnetic field is born deep below our feet, in the planet's molten core. There, liquid iron moves in enormous currents, generating electricity that produces magnetism. It's what gives us our north and south poles, what guides compasses and shields the atmosphere from solar wind. But this invisible force is not steady. It wobbles, drifts, weakens, and sometimes even reverses. Every few 100,000 years, north becomes south, and south becomes north. The field we rely on for navigation and protection is a restless thing, changing constantly beneath the calm of the sky. At the South Pole, these changes are more dramatic. Antarctica is home to one of the most complex magnetic regions on Earth, a place where the lines of force twist in unexpected patterns, where anomalies appear and vanish like flickers of light. Modern instruments detect subtle variations in the magnetic field across the continent. In some areas, it's stronger than expected. In others, it's weaker. The reason, scientists discovered, lies partly in what's buried below. Dense, metallic structures deep within the crust that distort the planet's magnetic flow. One of the most striking of these anomalies was found beneath Wilkes Land, a region of East Antarctica. Satellite measurements of gravity and magnetism revealed a circular feature nearly 300 kilometres wide, hidden under more than a mile of ice. The data suggested a massive concentration of metal-rich rock, dense enough to bend both gravity and magnetic fields. When geophysicists first mapped it, they were stunned. The shape was perfectly round, like the scars left by ancient impacts. The Wilkes Land anomaly, as it came to be known, quickly became one of the great mysteries of the continent. Some researchers proposed that it might be the remains of a colossal meteorite impact, one so large that it could have contributed to the extinction of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. If that were true, then part of Earth's most violent history was frozen in the Antarctic crust, preserved under ice instead of water. Others suggested more ordinary explanations. Perhaps it was the remnant of an ancient volcanic system, or a dense intrusion of mantle rock forced upward by tectonic pressure. The data was inconclusive. The ice, as always, kept its secrets. But the discovery proved one thing beyond doubt. The ground beneath Antarctica was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. Where there is magnetism, there is motion. The Earth's core is in constant flux, and those movements ripple upward through the mantle, altering the field at the surface. Antarctica, sitting atop the southern magnetic pole, feels these fluctuations more acutely than anywhere else. Scientists who monitor the field from research stations record changes measured in nanoteslas, numbers so small they seem trivial, yet over time they reveal an immense restlessness. The pole itself drifts across the continent, shifting slowly toward the sea at a rate of several kilometres each year. The map of magnetism is always redrawing itself. For early explorers, this instability was both a frustration and a fascination. In the days before satellite navigation, the magnetic pole was the only guide through the white void. But the closer one travelled to it, the less reliable the compass became. The needle would swing wildly, unable to settle. Ships veered off course, and sledging expeditions vanished into the blizzards. Some called the phenomenon the madness of the pole, as if the very air played tricks on direction. It wasn't madness, of course, and it was physics. But in those days the invisible felt like enchantment. As technology advanced, what had once been superstition became science. The anomalies were mapped, their sources measured. The field was no longer seen as mystical, but mechanical, a product of planetary dynamics. Yet even as understanding deepened, the mystery grew more profound. Beneath the ice, instruments detected faint magnetic signatures that didn't match known geology. Certain areas, especially near buried mountain ranges, produced readings that hinted at metal concentrations too strong to be explained by ordinary rock. Some scientists suggested ancient meteorites embedded in the crust. Others proposed that the anomalies might reveal hidden structures, perhaps remnants of old continental collisions, or even fragments of crust from long-lost land masses now swallowed by the Antarctic plate. These explanations, though grounded in data, carried an echo of the fantastical. Every scientific paper seemed to feed the same quiet curiosity that drove the legends. If there were massive metallic formations beneath the ice, what were they exactly? Ancient geological scars? Or something stranger? The line between science and speculation blurred again, as it often does when dealing with the unknown. Magnetic anomalies have a way of fueling imagination. They're invisible, measurable only through their effects, like shadows cast by unseen shapes. In Antarctica, where no one can dig deep enough to reach their source, they become invitations to wonder. Some researchers have joked that the continent's anomalies are like whispers from the planet's memory, faint signals from the deep past. Others, less literal but no less poetic, describe them as Earth's heartbeat, the rhythmic pulse of a living world hidden under ice. but there's also practical significance. These magnetic signatures help scientists reconstruct the continent's ancient movements. By analysing the orientation of magnetic minerals in rock samples, geologists can tell how land masses have drifted over time. The data from Antarctica shows that parts of the continent were once near the equator, covered in forests and rivers. As tectonic forces pulled Gondwana apart, the land slowly migrated south, carrying those magnetic imprints with it. Even after millions of years, the iron within the stone remembers which way was north. The continent itself, in a way, carries a built-in compass pointing to its own history. The Wilkes Land anomaly remains one of the strongest of these signatures. Its circular shape and metallic composition continue to puzzle scientists. Some believe it's a buried impact crater, half the size of the one left in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula by the asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs. If so, its discovery would reshape what we know about Earth's cataclysms. Others argue that the data doesn't fit an impact model perfectly. The density distribution, they say, looks more like uplifted mantle rock than a crater. The debate continues quietly in academic journals, far from the more dramatic interpretations that circulate online. Yet even in their careful language, scientists betray a sense of wonder. To measure something so massive, so ancient, hidden beneath 2 miles of ice, is to glimpse the deep machinery of the planet. It's not mythology, but it feels mythic all the same. Beneath the pole, the Earth's own history hums, magnetic, invisible, ceaseless. Every fluctuation recorded in the data is a message from below, a reminder that even the most silent places are never truly still. There's another kind of magnetism too, the psychological pull that Antarctica exerts on those who study it. Researchers who spend months at the South Pole Station often speak of a strange intimacy with the planet. Cut off from cities, noise, and time itself, they become attuned to subtler forces, the movement of stars, the faint vibration of the ice, the hum of instruments measuring phenomena too vast to imagine. The magnetic field, though invisible, becomes something they feel rather than observe. One scientist once described it as the sound of the Earth, translated into numbers. For the public, the idea of magnetic mysteries beneath the ice quickly merged with the mythic. The Black Pyramid, already a symbol of the unknown, became linked to the anomalies. Theories circulated suggesting that the magnetic distortions were caused not by geology, but by something artificial. Vast structures buried deep underground, generating fields of their own. Some even claim that governments were secretly investigating these readings, their silent proof of hidden discoveries. To scientists, these ideas were fantasy. But to many outside the academic world, the coincidences felt too perfect to ignore. The real story, as always, is subtler. Antarctica's magnetism is not a mystery of conspiracy, but of complexity. The crust beneath the continent is a patchwork of ancient terrains, fragments of old continents welded together over billions of years. Each piece has its own magnetic fingerprint, formed when the rock first solidified. When measured from above, these fingerprints overlap, creating strange patterns that defy easy interpretation. What seems like a single anomaly may be a collage of many smaller ones stacked and buried under ice. The puzzle is intricate and the pieces are hidden. To map these invisible patterns, scientists use aircraft fitted with magnetometers, sensitive instruments that record variations in the magnetic field as they fly in long looping grids over the ice. The data is then combined with satellite observations to build a three-dimensional picture of what lies below. It's painstaking work, often carried out in brutal conditions. Pilots fly in near darkness, through winds that shake the plane like paper. Every reading, every blip of distortion becomes a clue. Over time, the continent's magnetic portrait begins to take shape, an abstract painting of force and stone. What emerges from those maps is both logical and awe-inspiring. Beneath the ice lies not a single continent, but a collage of ancient worlds. fragments of Africa, India and Australia stitched together by deep time. The magnetic signatures trace the seams where they joined, the scars of creation and separation. The field lines bend around buried mountains, twist over old volcanic regions, and ripple across deep basins filled with sediment. Each distortion tells a story of collision, eruption, or drift. The beauty of it is in the order hidden beneath apparent chaos. The planet's magnetism is, in its own way, a storyteller. It carries within it the memory of every change the Earth has endured, the reversals of polarity, the migrations of continents, the cataclysms that reset the clock of evolution. Antarctica's anomalies are part of that narrative, clues left behind by processes that span millions of years. They are not messages from ancient builders or buried machines, but they are messages nonetheless, written in the quiet language of physics. For those who listen closely, they reveal a world in constant transformation. The same field that guides migratory birds and protects the atmosphere also ties us to the molten heart of the planet. Its fluctuations remind us that nothing is fixed, not even north or south. Everything moves, even when it seems still. The ice may appear eternal, but beneath it the magnetic field swirls and hums, restless as thought. In that sense, the magnetic secrets beneath the pole connect the myths and the science. Both speak of hidden forces shaping the visible world. Both remind us that reality is layered, that beneath every surface there is another and another still. The geologists measure it with instruments, the dreamers feel it in stories, but they're both sensing the same thing, the quiet, invisible power of a living Earth. Some nights at the polar stations, when the sky clears and the aurora begins to dance, the connection becomes almost visible. Curtains of green and violet shimmer across the darkness, their movement guided by the magnetic field itself. It's the field made visible, a silent echo of the forces beneath. The scientists step outside to watch, their breath turning to crystals in the air. For a few moments, the data on their instruments becomes light in the sky. The same magnetic currents they measure flow through the heavens, shaping beauty from physics. And when the lights fade, the stillness returns. The instruments continue to hum, recording the unseen, while the ice groans softly under the weight of eternity. Somewhere beneath their feet, the magnetic field lines twist and shift, tracing the contours of buried mountains and valleys. The anomalies persist, silent and unseen, waiting to be mapped more clearly. The Black Pyramid, whether real or imagined, stands not far in spirit from those mysteries. Both are symbols of the same truth. Beneath the ice, the world is far from still. As the polar night deepens, the continent breathes in its slow rhythm, and the magnetic heart of the Earth continues to beat below. The scientists will keep measuring, and others will keep imagining. Between them lies the quiet wonder that drives both. The knowledge that even in the most frozen place on Earth, the invisible continues to move, shaping what we cannot see and reminding us that mystery is not the absence of understanding, but the presence of depth. Beneath the miles of ice that blanket Antarctica, there is a world that few imagined could exist. It is a realm without sunlight, without seasons, without sound, sealed away for millions of years beneath a ceiling of frozen time. Yet, hidden in that darkness are lakes, hundreds of them, vast bodies of liquid water trapped between the ice and the rock below. They are invisible from the surface, silent except for the slow drip of melt and the faint vibration of distant movement. These lakes form one of the most isolated ecosystems on Earth, preserved in perfect cold, untouched by the atmosphere or the life above. The discovery of these hidden lakes began, as so many Antarctic mysteries do, with the echo of radar. In the 1970s, researchers using radio waves to map the thickness of the ice noticed strange reflections. Beneath some areas, the signals bounce back brightly. as though they were striking smooth liquid surfaces. At first, scientists thought it must be error. Water shouldn't exist at those depths, where the temperature is far below freezing. But as the data multiplied, the pattern became undeniable. There were lakes down there, sealed off from the surface by miles of pressure. The largest of them was Lake Vostok, a body of water so immense that it stretched more than 200 kilometres in length and over a kilometre deep. It was, in essence, a hidden sea. Lake Vostok became a legend among scientists long before it was ever touched. For decades, it remained unreachable, its surface buried beneath nearly 4 kilometres of solid ice. To reach it risked contamination, both of the lake and of the delicate balance within. Scientists had to invent new drilling techniques to approach without disturbing what they were trying to observe. The project spanned years of effort and silence, as if the continent itself were resisting intrusion. Only in 2012 did the drill finally break through, and for the first time water that hadn't seen light for at least 15 million years rose toward the surface. What it contained was both astonishing and humbling. Tiny forms of life, microbes, living in total darkness, surviving in near-freezing temperatures and crushing pressure. They fed not on sunlight, but on minerals leaching from the rock below, on the chemical reactions of water and stone. In that isolation, they had evolved into something entirely unique. Some were related to species known elsewhere on Earth, but others were unlike anything ever catalogued. They had no connection to the biosphere above, no dependence on air or light. They were in every sense children of the deep. The existence of life in such a place changed what science thought possible. Until then, it was believed that ecosystems required sunlight, that photosynthesis was the foundation of all complex life. But the lakes beneath Antarctica proved otherwise. They showed that life could thrive on chemistry alone, drawing energy from minerals and the faint heat of the planet. The implications reached far beyond Earth. If life could survive here, under miles of ice, perhaps it could exist on other frozen worlds, on Europa, the icy moon of Jupiter, or Enceladus, orbiting Saturn. The hidden lakes of Antarctica became analogues for alien oceans, laboratories of the possible. But Lake Vostok is not alone. As radar and satellite imaging improved, scientists discovered that the continent is riddled with such pockets, more than 400 subglacial lakes scattered across the bedrock. Some are small, just a few kilometres wide. Others rival inland seas. They're connected by narrow channels through which water flows slowly, taking decades or even centuries to travel from one to another. This hidden network is called the subglacial hydrological system, and it is one of the planet's most secretive circulatory systems. The ice above acts like a cap, keeping the water under immense pressure and preventing it from freezing. In some places, geothermal heat from below adds just enough warmth to maintain liquidity. The result is a stable, enclosed world, an environment as alien as it is ancient. Each lake has its own character. Some are isolated, sealed for millions of years. Others exchange water periodically, as shifting ice opens and closes the channels between them. The chemical composition varies too. Some are rich in salt, others fresh, others acidic or alkaline. A few contain high levels of methane and sulfur compounds, hinting at geological activity beneath. To study them, scientists rely on instruments lowered through boreholes, collecting samples of water, sediment, and gas. Every time they do, they find something new, a different microbe, a new chemical signature, a clue to how life adapts in the absence of sunlight. The ecosystems that exist in these lakes are built on simplicity, but within that simplicity lies resilience. The microbes recycle nutrients in closed loops, transforming inorganic compounds into energy. Some oxidize iron or sulfur, others reduce carbon dioxide into organic matter. They are chemolitho-autotrophs, organisms that live off the rock itself. To them, the planet's crust is both habitat and food. They represent the most basic and most enduring form of life imaginable, one that predates complex multicellular evolution and may outlast it as well. The sediments at the bottom of these lakes hold even older secrets. Cores extracted from beneath the ice reveal layers of material that record ancient climates. Trapped within are traces of pollen, mineral grains, and even fossilized microorganisms from epochs when Antarctica was warm and green. In those samples, scientists find proof that the continent once supported forests and rivers. Some of the species identified in the sediment are distant relatives of modern plants that still grow in temperate regions today. The lakes, in effect, are both habitat and archive, living museums of Earth's past. For those who believe in lost civilizations, the idea of vast warm lakes beneath the ice only fuels speculation. If water can flow freely beneath the surface, if entire hidden worlds can exist untouched by light, then what else might be concealed there? Some theorists suggest that the ancient myths of cities buried by cataclysm could be rooted in such places. Perhaps not literally, but symbolically. Memories of land lost to ice, preserved in collective imagination. Science, cautious as ever, avoids such conclusions, yet even scientists admit that the concept has a certain poetry. The more we learn about Antarctica, the less absurd the notion of hidden worlds becomes. One of the most intriguing features recently discovered is Lake Mercer, a massive body of water buried under more than a kilometre of ice. In 2019, scientists successfully drilled down to it and recovered samples of sediment that told an astonishing story. They found remnants of diatoms, microscopic algae that live in sunlight, embedded in the mud. These remains were at least 100,000 years old, possibly older, suggesting that the lake had once been open to the atmosphere, part of a larger ecosystem. In that brief window of warmth, life had flourished, only to be sealed away again when the ice returned. The discovery blurred the line between present and past, between what is frozen and what merely sleeps. The same team also detected traces of DNA belonging to bacteria and small multicellular organisms. It was evidence that the subglacial environment was not sterile, but dynamic, a slow, cold version of the living Earth above. Even in the deepest isolation, the cycle of life continues. Cells divide, consume, reproduce and die, all at a pace measured in centuries rather than days. It's a reminder that life doesn't require abundance, only persistence. These ecosystems operate on timescales beyond human comprehension. Nutrient exchange, chemical reactions, even biological evolution happen so slowly that an entire human civilization could rise and fall in the time it takes for one microbial population to change. Yet in their slowness, they embody stability. The lakes are sanctuaries of continuity in a world that never stops changing. They've endured ice ages, magnetic reversals, and continental drift, untouched by surface catastrophe. To peer into one is to glimpse a version of life that has never known sunlight or fear or time as we understand it. Scientists studying these environments often speak of them with quiet reverence. The act of lowering an instrument into such a lake feels like reaching into another world, one that existed long before ours and will likely remain long after. The water that comes up from those depths carries more than data. It carries perspective. It reminds us that the conditions we consider extreme are in fact ordinary for most of the universe. The cosmos is full of cold, dark places. That life can persist in such a realm here, on our own planet, suggests that existence itself is far more adaptable than we have dared to imagine. And yet, for all our progress, the majority of these lakes remain untouched. Each one is a closed system, vulnerable to contamination. A single mistake, a drop of oil, a microbe from human skin, could alter a habitat that has remained unchanged for millions of years. For this reason, scientists approach them with the same caution they would an alien planet. They sterilize every instrument, monitor every layer of ice removed, and sometimes choose not to drill at all. The ethics of exploration weigh heavily. Some things, they argue, might be better left undisturbed. The presence of these hidden lakes also affects the ice above them. Where water accumulates, the glaciers move faster, lubricated by the liquid layer beneath. When the lakes drain or fill, the surface shifts, sometimes by several meters. This dynamic interaction links the invisible world below to the vast ice sheets above, influencing everything from glacial flow to sea level. In a sense, the lakes are the lungs of the continent, inhaling and exhaling water over cycles that span centuries. Their rhythm keeps the ice alive. It's tempting to imagine these places not as mere bodies of water, but as vaults, sealed chambers of time. In them might lie the DNA of ancient organisms, the chemistry of lost climates, perhaps even the first blueprints of life itself. The same ingredients that once gave rise to biology on Earth may still be present, preserved in molecular fossils. Every sample extracted is a step backward through history, a conversation with the deep past conducted in the language of atoms and isotopes. When researchers study those samples, what they find is both ordinary and profound. Simple sugars, amino acids, and lipid membranes, the basic components of cells, appear in abundance. It's life reduced to its essence, stripped of complexity, yet still functional. To most, this is science. To others, it borders on philosophy. The question isn't just how these forms survive, but what they say about the nature of existence itself. Life, it seems, is not an anomaly, but a tendency, something the universe does wherever it can. The hidden lakes and their ecosystems are Antarctica's quietest revolution. They remind us that the planet is not as dead or frozen as it appears. Beneath the silence, processes continue, slow and invisible but unbroken. The same might be true beyond this world, beneath the ice of distant moons, under the crust of Mars, or within the shadows of exoplanets orbiting cold stars. In that sense, the subglacial world is not only part of Earth's history, but part of a universal story. When the wind howls across the plateau and the temperature drops to levels that could kill in minutes, it's easy to believe that nothing could survive here. Yet 2 miles below, life endures, small and steady, untroubled by the chaos above. The microbes drift in their black water, feeding on stone and memory. They ask for nothing and give everything. The proof that existence doesn't need warmth or light to continue. Perhaps that is the lesson hidden beneath the ice. That life is not a miracle, but a persistence. That even in the coldest, darkest corners of the world, the spark endures. The lakes remain unseen, their waters undisturbed, their inhabitants oblivious to the curiosity they inspire. And somewhere among them, the magnetic field still hums, the ice still moves, and the old pyramid still stands in its frozen silence, all part of the same immense system of motion and memory. The story of Antarctica is, in the end, a story of what lies beneath. Not just rock and water, but continuity itself. The lakes, the microbes, the magnetic forces, the buried mountains. They all remind us that the world we know is only the surface. Below it flows another reality, older, slower, quieter, where everything still moves but nothing hurries. It is the earth dreaming, undisturbed, in the long sleep of ice. For all the instruments that now orbit the planet and the data that flows endlessly from them, there remains something in us that refuses to be satisfied with knowing. The more we measure, the more the unknown seems to stretch ahead, like the horizon of the white continent itself. Endless, unreachable, shimmering just out of focus. Antarctica, more than any other place on Earth, mirrors that feeling. It's a landscape of absence, a place where the silence itself feels like a message. In its stillness, the mind begins to wander, filling the emptiness with meaning. That instinct, to search for patterns, for intention, for secrets hidden in plain sight, is one of the oldest traits of our species. It's what built civilizations, what shaped myths, what still keeps us awake in the dark, wondering what lies beneath the surface of things. The Black Pyramid of Antarctica, whether a geological illusion or a monument of imagination, owes its power to that same need. It speaks not to evidence, but to yearning. Every photograph, every rumour, every unexplained anomaly becomes a thread that connects us to something larger than fact. For many, it's not about proving that the pyramid is real. It's about feeling that the world still has corners that haven't been explained away. In an age where satellites can map the texture of the ocean floor and algorithms can predict weather years in advance, mystery becomes rare and therefore precious. Our ancestors lived surrounded by the unknown. The stars above were fires without names. The forests held spirits and dangers unseen. The sea hid worlds beyond imagining. To survive, they invented explanations, stories to fill the void where knowledge could not yet reach. The unknown was not frightening. It was sacred. It was the realm of gods, of dreams, of possibilities. That instinct never vanished. It simply changed form. We no longer look to thunder and see angered deities, but we still look to the horizon and wonder what waits beyond. Antarctica is the last horizon left on Earth, and its very existence reminds us that mystery is not yet extinct. Even those who dedicate their lives to science are not immune to it. The best researchers are guided not by certainty but by curiosity, the sense that something lies just beyond understanding. They build instruments and equations to chase the same feeling that myths once offered. The difference is in language, not in spirit. To measure the depth of an unseen lake, to trace the magnetic hum of buried mountains, to calculate the chemistry of microbes living in eternal darkness. All of these acts are modern prayers to the same old hunger. The human need for mystery is not weakness. It's a form of strength. It keeps us moving, searching, questioning. Without it, there would be no discovery, no art, no science. Every question begins as a whisper of doubt, the thought that what we know is not the whole story. And so, in a sense, the Black Pyramid is not an obstacle to reason, but a companion to it. It's a reminder that skepticism and wonder are not opposites. They are the two hands that hold progress steady. When people stare at images of that pyramid-like mountain and imagine an ancient civilization buried beneath the ice, they're not necessarily rejecting science. They're participating in something older, a narrative instinct that binds human thought across time. The need to find meaning in shape, purpose in pattern, story in silence. It's the same impulse that led early humans to paint animals on cave walls, to carve stones into circles, to raise their eyes to the constellations and give them names. The mystery gives shape to imagination, and imagination gives life to knowledge. Without one, the other fades. There is a quiet irony in how technology, meant to explain everything, has made mystery more alluring. The internet has turned speculation into echo, amplifying every rumour until it feels almost alive. A photograph of a mountain becomes a window into lost history. A misinterpreted radar reading becomes a doorway to wonder. For scientists, this can be frustrating, but also revealing. It shows how powerful mystery remains in the human psyche. We are not built to live in a world where everything is known. We need shadows, not for fear, but for perspective. The philosophers of the Enlightenment once believed that if enough knowledge could be gathered, all mystery would disappear. They imagined a future where the universe could be entirely understood, every law written, every question answered. But the deeper science has gone, the more complex the picture becomes. Each discovery opens 10 new questions. Each layer of understanding reveals another beneath it. The atom splits into particles, the particles into forces, the forces into fields, the fields into probabilities. Beneath everything lies uncertainty, not as a flaw, but as the foundation. The universe, it seems, was built to be mysterious. Antarctica embodies that paradox. It is both known and unknowable. We have mapped its surface, drilled into its lakes, traced its magnetism, yet it remains fundamentally alien. Its silence is not emptiness, but depth, a reminder that knowledge does not erase wonder, it deepens it. The more we learn about the continent, the more it resists simplification. Every answer leads to another layer of ice, another buried world. The Black Pyramid, real or not, has become a symbol of that resistance. It reminds us that some parts of reality can be seen but never fully understood, and that this, perhaps, is the point. For centuries, mystery has been treated as something to conquer. Explorers sailed into the unknown to map it, to claim it, to make it familiar. But mystery is not a territory, it's a relationship. It exists between what is known and what is not, like the edge of twilight between night and day. To erase it entirely would be to flatten the world into something sterile. We need the space between certainty and speculation, because it's in that space that meaning grows. Even in personal life, the same pattern holds. The stories we tell ourselves about where we come from, why we dream, what happens after we die, these are all forms of mystery. They give coherence to our experience, a shape to our unknowing. The myths of Atlantis, of lost continents, of forgotten civilizations, are simply larger versions of the same instinct. They're ways of making sense of absence. The Black Pyramid is an extension of that lineage, an object of focus for the imagination, a mirror reflecting our own desire to believe that the world is bigger than our maps. There is comfort in mystery. It softens the edges of certainty, makes the universe feel alive rather than mechanical. When we say something is unexplained, we're not confessing defeat. We're acknowledging participation in something ongoing. The world isn't finished being known. It's still unfolding, still revealing itself in pieces. The unknown gives life its texture, its movement. Without it, everything would be static, complete, and therefore lifeless. In Antarctica, that awareness takes physical form. Standing on the ice, surrounded by nothing but white horizon, you realize how fragile the line is between comprehension and awe. The wind moves, the light shifts, and suddenly everything looks new again. A ridge becomes a wall, a shadow becomes a doorway. In that endless sameness, the mind begins to create, to see meaning in shape and silence. The human brain cannot tolerate true emptiness. It fills it with pattern, with story, with presence. The Black Pyramid is not an illusion of rock. It is an illusion of thought, a manifestation of how we bridge the gap between seeing and understanding. That bridge has always existed. Ancient sailors filled their maps with sea monsters because the blank spaces terrified them. Astronomers named constellations to make sense of chaos. Historians reconstructed timelines out of fragments, guessing where evidence failed. Every act of imagination was a way of taming the unknown without erasing it. The same process happens today, just in a new language. Pixels instead of parchment, algorithms instead of compasses. The shape of mystery changes, but its purpose doesn't. It reminds us that we are still explorers. The scientists who work in Antarctica often describe an unexpected effect the continent has on them. After months surrounded by ice and silence, their thoughts slow. Time stretches. Their sense of the familiar dissolves. The smallest details become meaningful. The sound of snow underfoot, the glint of light on a frozen ridge, the trace of warmth in the wind. They say it feels like living inside a question, and perhaps that is what mystery truly is. Not something to solve, but something to inhabit. Human history is full of attempts to destroy mystery, to classify and label every phenomenon until none remain. But each time we think we've reached the end, something new emerges. The microbe beneath the ice, the signal from deep space, the pattern in the magnetic field. Mystery renews itself as quickly as we dissolve it. It's not a failure of understanding, but a feature of existence. The world seems designed to keep a part of itself hidden, as if to ensure that curiosity never dies. The more you think about it, the more the Black Pyramid becomes less an object and more an idea. the idea that there must always be something left to find. Whether carved by ancient hands or by wind and time, it performs the same function. It keeps the imagination alive. It tells us that the story isn't finished. In that sense, the need for mystery is the same as the need for meaning. They are two words for the same hunger, to feel that our brief lives are part of something larger, something still unfolding. Even as science advances, that need will not fade. The telescopes will look deeper, the probes will travel farther, the equations will grow more precise, but the horizon will always move with us. There will always be another layer beneath the ice, another signal waiting to be heard. And that perhaps is the most beautiful truth of all, that the universe never stops offering questions. The Black Pyramid will continue to stand in the imagination, unmoved by time or certainty. The scientists will keep explaining it, the dreamers will keep believing in it, and both will be right in their own way. Because mystery isn't a contradiction of knowledge, it's its companion. It's the space that keeps thought alive. Without it, discovery would end. As the Antarctic wind drifts over the frozen mountains, carrying nothing but the sound of itself, the world above sleeps while the world below continues unseen. The lakes still move, the microbes still live, the magnetic field still turns, and the human mind still reaches toward what it cannot touch. That reaching is our inheritance. It's what defines us. The need to wonder, to imagine, to believe that even in the age of satellites and data streams, the Earth still holds something sacred. And in the silence of that frozen land, that need finds its reflection. The pyramid stands not as proof, but as possibility. Its sharp edges, its dark shadow, its isolation, all reminders that we're drawn not to answers, but to questions. Because to be human is to stand before the unknown and listen for meaning in the wind, to feel the quiet pulse beneath the ice, and know, without proof, that mystery itself is a kind of truth. There is a particular silence that exists only in the oldest places of the world. It's not the silence of absence, but of endurance, the kind that feels like it has been waiting longer than memory. Antarctica has that silence. It's not just the cold that stills the air, nor the endless ice that muffles every sound, but something deeper. When you stand there, surrounded by nothing but white horizon, it feels as if the earth itself is remembering. The mountains seem older than time, the valleys older than the continents we know. In such a place, the mind begins to imagine not what might come next, but what might have come long before. That thought has haunted explorers, writers, and dreamers for generations. What if we are not the first? What if others, older and more capable than ourselves, once walked the same ground long before the first cities rose from mud and stone? The idea isn't new. It's older than recorded history, passed down in myths and stories scattered across every civilization. Tales of beings who came before humanity, who shaped the world and then vanished into the deep past. They were called gods, giants, watchers, teachers. In modern terms, they've become something else entirely. An ancient civilization advanced beyond what we can imagine, perhaps buried under the ice, perhaps remembered only in fragments of legend and architecture. In the story of the Black Pyramid, this idea finds its reflection. The notion that beneath the ice of Antarctica might lie the remains of a culture so old that it predates the continents as we know them. For believers, it's more than fantasy. It's an answer to the strange coincidences of ancient architecture, the recurring pyramids, the shared geometry, the impossible knowledge of astronomy and mathematics that seems to appear fully formed across early human societies. What if those similarities aren't coincidences at all? What if they're remnants of inheritance? The last echoes of a forgotten civilization that once spanned the globe? It's tempting because it feels logical on an emotional level. History is short, yet the Earth is ancient. Civilization as we know it has existed for only a few thousand years, but the planet has carried oceans and mountains for billions. In that scale of time, there's room for countless rises and falls, for stories that have been erased by flood, fire, and ice. We've found ruins swallowed by jungle, cities buried under sand, coastlines drowned by the sea. We know that entire species of humans once walked beside us, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and others whose names are only just being uncovered. If entire branches of humanity can vanish, why not civilizations? For centuries, science assumed that progress was linear, that humanity began in caves and moved steadily toward the present. But every discovery seems to complicate that story. We find ancient structures that challenge timelines, technologies that appear out of sequence. Göbekli Tepe, built over 11,000 years ago, rose long before agriculture or writing, yet it shows planning and symbolism far beyond what was thought possible for its time. Stonework in South America fits so precisely that even modern tools struggle to replicate it. Myths of floods, of sky gods, of great teachers descending from above repeat in cultures that never met. Each fragment on its own is small, but together they form a pattern that feels older than any single civilization. In that pattern, Antarctica becomes the final missing piece, the one place left where a whole chapter of prehistory could still be hidden. If an advanced culture once existed before the end of the last ice age, much of its evidence would now be lost beneath rising seas or buried under glaciers. When the planet warmed after the Younger Dryas period, sea levels rose by more than 100 meters. Entire landscapes vanished beneath the ocean. What might have been on the southern continent before it froze? What coastlines, what cities, what monuments might now lie preserved beneath the ice? Scientists are careful to separate evidence from imagination, but even some of them admit that our understanding of deep human history is incomplete. The archaeological record is biased toward what survived, stone, bone, metal, and ignores what did not. Entire cultures could have existed using materials that left no trace. Time is ruthless. It erases almost everything. In that erasure, imagination takes root. The absence of evidence becomes a kind of negative space, inviting stories to fill it. And so, we dream of the ones who came before us. The idea that an older civilization once walked the earth does not necessarily require fantasy. It requires only humility. Our species has lived for hundreds of thousands of years, yet we've recorded only a small fraction of that time. It's entirely possible that human societies rose and fell long before the ones we know, their achievements erased by catastrophe or absorbed into myth. Ice ages would have wiped clean any trace of coastal cities. Shifting tectonic plates would have buried entire regions. The world renews itself constantly, and what remains is only what chance decided to spare. For some, this line of thinking leads inevitably to Antarctica. The continent is both the perfect vault and the perfect metaphor. Its ice preserves everything it touches. It's the closest thing Earth has to eternity, a frozen archive of forgotten worlds. If a civilization had ever existed there, the evidence might still lie intact deep beneath the glaciers. But even if it never did, the possibility itself is powerful enough to hold our fascination, because it asks a question that science alone can't answer. If others once existed before us, what would that mean for who we are now? In ancient traditions, there are echoes of such beings. The Egyptians spoke of gods who ruled before the first dynasties, their names recorded on lists that stretch back into myth. The Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki, skyborn beings who taught humankind agriculture and kingship. The Greeks had the Titans, the Hindus, the Devas and Asuras, the Mayans, the Itzamna. These stories are not identical, yet they all share the same rhythm. The idea that wisdom came from before, that knowledge was inherited, not invented. Whether divine or human, these figures are always described as older than history, their civilizations lost to time. The Black Pyramid, real or imagined, becomes a symbol of that inheritance, a monument to something that preceded us, still casting a shadow through the ice. Skeptics argue, rightly, that myth does not equal memory. Stories evolve, meanings shift, and metaphors harden into belief. But even if the tales are symbolic, their persistence suggests something deeper. Why does nearly every culture imagine a time before time, a golden age that ended in catastrophe? Why do flood myths appear on every continent? Perhaps they are psychological, reflections of our awareness of impermanence, or perhaps they are cultural memories, distorted by millennia but grounded in real events. The end of an ice age, the rise of the seas, the collapse of civilizations we've yet to discover. When we ask what if they were here before us, we're really asking what it means to be human in an old world. We tend to think of ourselves as the centre of history, but the Earth has had countless inhabitants, countless intelligences of its own. The forests think in slow motion, the oceans communicate in silence, even the microbes beneath the ice operate in a kind of collective awareness. In that sense, we are not the first thinking beings, we are just the first to measure our thoughts. The idea that others might have come before us, human or not, reminds us that we are part of a continuum, not its conclusion. Some scientists working far from myth have begun to consider similar ideas in different language. They call it the Silurian hypothesis, after the ancient geological period. The question of whether an industrial civilization could have existed on Earth millions of years ago and left no trace. Their reasoning is simple. Human civilization has existed for only a blink of geological time. If another species had risen and fallen millions of years before us, erosion and tectonics would have erased nearly all evidence. Even the traces of our own cities, if left untouched, would vanish within a few 100,000 years. In that context, the Earth could have hosted many civilizations, each unaware of the ones that came before. It's a humbling thought, that the planet may have stories older than we can comprehend. That intelligence may not be rare but cyclical, that every age of light is followed by an age of forgetting, and that what we call beginnings are often just reawakenings. The Black Pyramid, then, becomes not a monument of conspiracy, but a symbol of recurrence. It asks whether humanity is truly unique, or simply the latest expression of a pattern written into the Earth itself. In Antarctica, time behaves differently. The ice preserves without preference. Everything that falls there stays there. Dust from deserts, ash from volcanoes, pollen from vanished forests, traces of air from ancient atmospheres. It layers these remnants carefully, one upon another, turning history into geology. Somewhere deep within those layers might lie the residue of events we cannot yet name, fires that burned before our species began, minerals shaped by hands we've forgotten. Each discovery from the ice core is a line in a story that has no clear author. The more we learn, the more the past feels infinite. The thought that others might have come before us doesn't diminish humanity. It expands it. It situates us within a longer arc of time, where knowledge is not owned, but rediscovered. It transforms the Black Pyramid from an object of speculation into a metaphor for continuity. The enduring structure beneath the snow that outlives every cycle of civilization. The question isn't whether it was built by hands like ours, but whether it represents the same impulse that drives us now. The need to leave something behind, to reach beyond the present, to mark existence in stone before the ice returns. If there were others before us, their silence is profound. They left no clear trace, no language we can read, no ruins we can name, and yet in some way we might still feel them, not as ghosts, but as echoes within our own ambitions. Every city, every monument, every act of creation carries the same defiance of time. We build to be remembered, even if the ice is patient and the wind forgets our names. That instinct may not be new. It may be the oldest inheritance of all. The human need for mystery and the possibility of predecessors are not opposites. They are part of the same question. Why does the world feel older than we can explain? When we look at the Antarctic pyramid, or the ruins of lost temples, or the stars above, We are not just seeking proof of others. We are seeking connection to the idea that consciousness has always existed in some form, watching itself through different eyes, across different ages. Perhaps they were here before us, and perhaps they will come again after us. Perhaps every civilization is a brief light that rises, fades, and leaves behind only questions. In that sense, the Black Pyramid doesn't have to be evidence of anything literal. It's a reflection of our own awareness of impermanence, a mirror held up by the planet, reminding us that we too will one day be buried beneath layers of silence and time. And still, the ice endures. The winds continue to carve the same mountain, the same angles, the same shadow that first captured our imagination. The world turns, the magnetic poles drift, and the silence deepens. Somewhere beneath it all, the earth keeps its memories, indifferent to belief or doubt. Whether others came before or not, the mystery remains, and in that mystery something eternal stirs. We are not the first to wonder, and we will not be the last. Every generation stands at the edge of its own horizon and asks the same quiet question. Not just what lies beyond, but who might have stood there before, staring into the same distance, feeling the same pull toward the unknown. That thought, perhaps more than any discovery, is what binds us to the past. Because to imagine what came before us is to acknowledge that the story of the world is larger than ourselves, a story still being written, line by line, in ice and wind and silence. There is a moment in every search when silence becomes the answer. It happens not in triumph or revelation, but in the realization that the mystery itself is the message. Antarctica teaches that lesson better than any place on Earth. Its silence is not emptiness. It is density, a weight of meaning pressed into stillness. The ice doesn't hide the truth. It is the truth, written in the slow language of time. Every layer is a page, every trapped bubble of air a word, every shift in colour a memory of the world that was. To read it is to listen to the earth remembering itself. The story of the Black Pyramid, of the lost maps, of the hidden lakes and magnetic anomalies, all point toward the same truth, that what lies beneath the ice is neither myth nor miracle, but continuity. The planet has been keeping its own records long before humans began to write theirs. In the silence beneath the surface, everything that has ever happened still exists in some form, compressed, frozen, stored in the deep cold. The air from ancient forests, the dust from volcanic ages, the echoes of cataclysms and renewals. All of it sleeps beneath the white plain. The pyramid, whether carved by nature or time, is only one line in that vast diary. If you could descend through the ice, past the layers of snow that mark every century, you would travel backward through history. The modern world would vanish first, then the empires, then the ages of stone and bronze. The mammoths would rise again in frozen herds, then fade into the mists of the Pleistocene, go deeper still, and you'd enter eras before memory, jungles where Antarctica was green and steaming, rivers flowing where glaciers now grind, skies filled with creatures that left no trace but the bones pressed into rock. All of that still exists down there, not alive, but not gone either. The ice keeps everything. The quiet truth beneath it all is not hidden civilization, but hidden time. Time itself has weight here. It accumulates. It doesn't flow the way it does elsewhere. It settles layer upon layer until the surface of the continent becomes a kind of mirror, reflecting everything that has ever been, but in reverse. What looks like emptiness is actually fullness beyond comprehension. That's why the silence feels alive. It's not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything sound has ever been, waiting. Scientists who study the ice understand this intuitively, even if they don't say it aloud. Each borehole they drill, each core they lift to the surface, is an act of listening. The cylinders of ice pulled from the deep look simple, clear, solid, unremarkable, but within them lie hundreds of thousands of years of unbroken record. The trapped air reveals how the atmosphere changed, how the planet breathed differently when forests stretched across the poles or when volcanoes darkened the sky. The dust particles tell of deserts and fires, of migrations of life across continents. Even the isotopes of hydrogen and oxygen reveal the temperature of ancient seasons. Reading those layers is like hearing the planet speak in whispers, syllable by syllable, about everything it remembers. What the Black Pyramid represents when seen through this lens is not a secret structure, but a kind of reflection. A reminder that the world itself holds its own monuments, not built by hand, but by patience. The mountain stands because it has outlasted all the movements around it. The glaciers rise and fall, the ice shifts and melts, the continents drift, and still it remains, shaped but not erased. It is both natural and symbolic, proof that endurance can take the form of design without ever meaning to. There is a quiet dignity in that. The pyramid, the magnetic fields, the hidden lakes, even the microbes sleeping in the dark. They all tell the same story in different languages. The Earth has been alive far longer than we have been watching it, and it will continue long after we're gone. Our discoveries are not new facts, they are recognitions of what was always there. The truth beneath the ice is not revelation but remembrance. In that remembrance, science and myth finally meet. The myths were never wrong in their essence. They were attempts to describe what people felt when confronted by forces older than understanding. The gods of the ancient world, the watchers and the sky beings, the lost cities and buried worlds. They were ways of naming what we now call geology, biology, magnetism, and time. But the feeling that inspired them remains the same. The awe that built temples is the same awe that builds observatories. The wonder that saw gods in the sky is the same that sees galaxies in telescopes. Beneath the ice, that lineage continues unbroken. When researchers return from months in the field, their language changes. They speak slower, softer. They describe the silence as a presence, as though the continent itself were conscious. They talk about the light that never sets, the horizon that never ends, and how it shifts their sense of scale. After enough time there, the line between themselves and the land begins to blur. They start to see everything as process, even thought, even emotion, as part of the same slow movement that shapes glaciers and stars. Antarctica does that. It dismantles the illusion of separateness. It reminds anyone who stands upon it that humanity is not above the earth, but within it. The quiet truth beneath the ice is that we are temporary but not insignificant. Our curiosity is the continuation of the planet's own curiosity about itself. We dig and measure and map because the universe, through us, wants to know what it is made of. Every core sample, every photograph, every question whispered in the polar night is part of that conversation. Even the myths are part of it. Humanity's first attempts to translate that same longing into story. When people imagine lost civilizations beneath the ice, they were expressing the same instinct that sends scientists to drill there. Both are ways of asking the same question. What does the world remember? And the world does remember. It remembers in ice and in stone, in the slow dance of magnetic fields, and the quiet persistence of microbes. It remembers in fossil forests buried under glaciers, in the chemical signatures of air older than history, in the tiny bubbles that still hold the breath of ancient summers. Those are its archives, its libraries without words. The Earth doesn't forget, it just waits until someone learns how to read it. Perhaps that is why the idea of hidden civilization still feels alive, because in a sense, they do exist. They exist in the layers of the world itself, in the traces of all the lives and ages that came before. Every piece of rock and ice is a monument to what has been. The difference is that the builders were not gods or aliens or lost empires, but the slow, blind artistry of time. That realization does not make the world less mysterious. It makes it more so. There's something almost sacred in understanding that the truth doesn't need to be spectacular to be profound. The quiet mechanisms of nature, freezing, melting, shifting, eroding, have created a history deeper and grander than any legend. The mountain that looks like a pyramid doesn't have to be proof of ancient intelligence to be extraordinary. It's already a masterpiece. Its symmetry is the handwriting of physics, its endurance the proof of patience. To recognize that is not to dispel the mystery, but to honor it in a different way. The deeper scientists look, the more they realize that the line between myth and geology is not opposition, but translation. Myths speak in metaphor, science speaks in measurement. Both describe the same awe, the same quiet recognition that something vast and enduring lies beneath the surface. The truth under the ice is both scientific and poetic, the two sides of a single awareness. When the wind moves across the continent, it sometimes sounds like a voice, a low constant hum that resonates through the air. It's the sound of particles colliding, of air rushing over endless snow. Yet in the stillness between gusts, there's a different kind of sound, one that isn't heard but felt. It's the vibration of the planet itself, the slow movement of glaciers grinding against the rock. To stand there and feel it is to understand something wordless, that the earth is not silent, only slow. Its voice is measured in ages. That slowness is the truth that eludes modern life. We move fast, we measure in seconds, we expect answers immediately. But the world operates in patience. The ice speaks in millennia, the rocks in millions of years. The truth beneath the ice is patient too. It doesn't reveal itself in revelations or discoveries. It reveals itself in endurance, in the simple fact that everything that ever was is still here in some form, transformed but not lost. If you were to stand before the Black Pyramid and look closely, you'd see that its angles aren't perfect after all. The wind has softened them, the ice has smoothed its edges, the snow drifts against its sides. It is not a message written for us. It is the result of time's unending work, sculpting stone into meaning without ever intending to. But in that unintended shape lies something profound, the realization that beauty doesn't require design, that purpose can emerge from process, that meaning can arise from matter alone. That is the quiet truth beneath the ice. Not that the world hides its secrets from us, but that it shows them so slowly we mistake patience for silence. We are the ones who move too fast to notice. The answers are there, layered in cold clarity, waiting for the day we learn to listen on the same scale as the planet. The Black Pyramid will continue to stand as it always has, an accidental monument to that lesson. It doesn't need to be ancient or engineered to be sacred. It simply needs to exist to remind us that the Earth is older, wiser, and infinitely more intricate than we imagine. In the end, perhaps that's what mystery has always been trying to tell us, that truth is not something hidden to be found, but something visible to be understood slowly. The ice is not concealing, it is preserving. The silence is not emptiness, it is the sound of everything waiting to be remembered. Beneath the white expanse lies not a lost civilization, but the civilization of the planet itself, one that has never stopped building, never stopped changing, never stopped breathing. As the wind settles and the horizon blurs into the sky, the world feels suspended between moments. The continent sleeps, and yet it listens. The ice shifts imperceptibly. The water flows below, the magnetism hums through the rock, and the stars turn slowly above. Everything moves, but nothing hurries. The truth endures quietly, beneath miles of frozen time, untouched by belief or disbelief, by wonder or doubt. It waits, as it always has, for us to slow down enough to hear it.